Check one, check. Check one, check.
Will everybody take your seat? We're going to start on time. We have a very welcome first. Welcome, everybody. We have an overbooked crowd here, so we're going to try to move everybody in quickly. We have a really full agenda this morning, or for the day. We hope you'll stay with us for the whole day. But welcome from the Hawaii Energy Policy Forum. I'm Sharon Moriwaki. I'm going to turn this over to Jay Fidel, who's going to start us off right now.
I didn't see you. There she is. Okay, this is the 6th annual Hawaii Clean Energy Day program, 22nd of July, 2014. So welcome to that day. It's a special day. Great to see you here. And to celebrate clean energy, this is going to be the best Clean Energy Day ever because of the power and diversity of this group. That is when they come in from the ante-room. Yeah? And also because we have an exciting technology, livesift.com, that's going to help us through the program. The other thing is we are audio broadcasting this program. So if you want to tell your friends to listen from wherever they are, tell them to listen on thinktechhawaii.com, where they can get the audio stream anywhere in the city, the state, the country, and the world. In Bulgaria, they can get this program. Okay? So take a minute also to turn on your iPad or iPhone, open a browser, go to livesift.com, okay, and log in with the keyword. The keyword is Alex. The keyword is energy. Huh? The key word is energy for all purposes, not just getting in on LiveSift. Okay, now when you're connected, Alex, where's Alex? Alex, what's the key word? Energy. I knew that. We all knew that. Now you know for sure it's energy. And it's the key word for everything. Okay, we'll be connected. We're using LiveSift to ask questions and to vote and rank and evaluate things that come up in the program. If you don't have one of these devices, an iPad or an iPhone, you want to ask questions, go to the back of the room, and there's at a support table you can use our iPad to do that. So where's the support group? Raise their hand, support group. There it is. It looks like Sharon. Okay, all right, it's back there. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is find out who's here. It's important for you to know and for our speakers to know who's here. They can calculate based on that. So tell us about yourself, and we'll know the demographics, right, Alex? We're going to ask them who they are. We're not going to do that. Okay. Okay. All right. Lots is happening in clean energy. Well, why don't we ask you anyway? You can watch the, okay? How many people in the energy industry, renewable or otherwise, look around and see what we have? Okay. How many people in government? Okay, that's not too threatening. Huh? How many people from academia? I see one. How many interested bystanders want to come down here and learn about stuff? Good for you, sir. Good for you, sir. Whoa, good for all of you. Special. Okay, this year lots is happening in clean energy, but where are we in advancing? Where are we in the continuum on the road to where we're going? The theme says it all. It's time for some group retrospection. Okay, let's get it together. We hope we can begin the conversation that will candidly assess where we are and what we need to do at this point in 2014, getting it all together. You can help us by listening well today, by trying to integrate what all these almost 30 speakers are saying and posing good questions to draw them out. That's why LiveSift, a technology that's going to help us accept and deliver those questions and let us consider those questions and the answers together. Maybe even come together, maybe even find out a little more about what needs to be done, action points. So we don't always agree on things, but today at Clean Energy Day, we're going to celebrate our engagement together. We're going to celebrate our collaboration and our progress so far. We're going to find out what we can do together going forward. First, we're going to have a brief overview from our keynote speaker, Jim Lazar. You can also visit with our exhibitors sometime today in the breezeway and courtyard to find out what they've been doing. And we'll hear updates on what's been achieved over the past year, what's coming down the pike for the state, the counties, and the business and residential communities. After that, we're going to hear from our 4 expert panels on the issues that we believe are now the most crucial in our quest for clean energy. To start, our morning keynote speaker will get us to focus on the priorities of what we must do. Our adventure in clean energy is not just a neat thing. In fact, failure is not an option. You'll hear from him. We're pleased that Jim Lazar, who came here today from Olympia, Washington, could join us. He brings a wealth of experience and expertise, 200 years of experience and expertise in transportation, economics, and electric utility rate making. He's a senior advisor to the Regulatory Assistance Project, a Vermont nonprofit that provides training and technical assistance to utility policymakers and legislative bodies in many places. And he knows Hawaii well. He's visited us more than 40 times, and now he's challenging us to do the right thing on clean energy. Bringing on Jim Lazar. A warm welcome for Jim Lazar. Jim, welcome.
Good morning, and it's great to be here, and it's wonderful to have such an enthusiastic group of people. Thank you, Sharon and Jay, for inviting me here today. It's really an honor to be before you. Hawaii has a pretty challenging energy future. Our job is to meet that challenge. The price we will face if we do not succeed is threatening in many ways. Failure is simply not an option. I first came to Hawaii in 1984, and I bicycled the perimeter highways of 4 islands. The ride up Chain of Craters Road from Kamomo Campground was a good challenge for me at the end of a long bicycling tour. And I came to love the islands. I visit regularly. I've been back more than 40 times since then, some for work, most for play. I've worked on rate cases involving Helco, HECO, MECO, the gas company, and the former Kauai Electric. I've snorkeled almost every spot on the snorkel maps that they give you at the dive shop, and I've made friends all over the state. Hawaii is truly unique in the world of energy. We are all alone out here, folks. In many ways, far removed from the very different challenges on the mainland U.S. and China, India, or Europe. The state has a deep environmental commitment. Most residents choose to live here, in large part because of the natural environment. I certainly come here in large part because of the natural environment. The state is phenomenally petroleum dependent for road transportation, for electricity, and for bringing the tourists who create a lot of employment here in the islands. And even the groceries come on ships using petroleum. The state has a stable economic, political, and legal framework. While other island nations are also petroleum dependent, Hawaii is fairly unique among island economies in its high level of income, access to capital, and a stable legal system. The fundamental economics are no different in Haiti, but the access to capital is very, very different. You can borrow $1 billion to do the right thing in Hawaii. Perhaps most important, the sun shines, the wind blows, and Pele appears willing to share some of her warmth with us. But there are many challenges, and they are much more intense than for mainland states. At the top of the list is the uncertain supply and the volatile and rising cost of petroleum. When the price of oil goes up, things change. Hawaii is extremely dependent on petroleum. The whole state energy consumption, more than 3/4, comes from petroleum. High oil prices mean high costs for electricity, for transportation, and for most everything we use. Yes, even our solar panels are delivered to us using, motor vehicles. And when the price of oil goes up more, the tourists don't come, and the state economy suffers. The jets get parked in the desert. Hawaii has taken great strides to address this petroleum dependence, far more than any other state. The target of 70% clean energy by 2030 is very ambitious, but we can get there. We can meet this challenge. But there are powerful forces working against us. Achieving this goal is not going to be easy. Frankly, if it was easy, we'd all be out doing something more fun than sitting in this room together. Let's start with transportation. That's what brought me here. It's brought all of us here in one way or another. The biggest piece of the pie of energy consumption, about 2/3 of the petroleum, goes to air, land, and marine transportation. Every form of motorized transportation uses a lot of energy. Even rail transit and bus transit use thousands of BTUs per passenger mile, almost as much as automobiles. But do take note, walking and bicycling are in a class of their own here in terms of transportation energy use. Hotel workers in Ka'anapali commute from Wailuku, and thousands commute into Honolulu from distant suburbs every day. This is not sustainable. The answer is not the sprawling cul-de-sac subdivisions of the past. Single-family subdivisions use too much land, too much energy, too much water, cause too long commutes that drain our bank accounts, pollute our air, and destroy our psychological health. This may not come easy to you, but the American dream of a single family home in a subdivision is a planetary nightmare. We will not solve our transportation energy addiction by driving a Prius. We will not solve our transportation energy addiction by carpooling in a Hummer. Frankly, we need to stop moving around so much. We need to wake up near where we work, play, go to school, eat, shop, and pray. Land use policies to ensure that people don't have to go far are crucial. It's a real challenge in Hawaii for many reasons, but it's a challenge we cannot shy away from. Our 2030 goal should be for half of us to get to work and school without depending on fossil fuel transportation. They do it in Amsterdam, and we can do it in Honolulu. I mean, heck, the weather is a lot nicer here than it is in Amsterdam. Almost half of the people arriving at the Kahului airport are headed to the Lahaina-Ka'anapali area. Do we really need to all drive separate rental cars back and forth between Lahaina and Kahului? Surely a transit plus car share system can evolve. Our 2030 goal should be to have half of our food supply from local island sources. This should not be impossible. There are more or less twice as many of us here now as there were when Cook arrived, and they all found something to eat. Our 2030 goal should be to be able to do most of our shopping without traveling very far. We need to have a system of delivery so we don't need or even want a car most of the time. We'll want to have an electric car sharing program for the odd visit to an odd location at an odd hour, similar to the one that they have in Milan today. But frankly, our auto dependence has to diminish. People who think we can drive as much as we do today, but power it with solar-charged electric cars, in my opinion, is living in fantasy land. Transportation and military uses of energy are not directly regulated. Good policies can change usage, but frankly, those effects tend to be gradual because they're related to land use. Now I'm going to turn to my main purpose in being here, electricity. Electricity is about 1/3 of the petroleum usage, and it's a place where state regulation can make a huge difference, and much more quickly. For the last 133 years or so, since David Kalakaua met Thomas Edison in New York, our electric grid has mostly been a system for delivering power from central generating stations to individual properties. Despite great step forwards in wind, solar, and geothermal energy development, and in energy efficiency, Hawaii remains very dependent on petroleum for electricity supply, particularly here on Oahu. Now, new homes have solar water heaters, and thousands of homes and businesses have solar photovoltaic systems, but it's not enough. Wind farms have been built on Oahu and on neighbor islands, but it's not enough. On Maui, Miko continues to spill wind power nearly every month because they have not adapted to a new world, installing grid controls that enable them to match loads to the new resources. The Big Island has enjoyed the benefit of geothermal power for a couple of decades now. Geothermal alone cannot solve our challenges. It's a base load resource with very little flexibility to follow loads through the day the way that we do now with petroleum-fueled power plants. Solar development means that many circuits are already at the point of exporting power at some times of the day. Now, the system really was not designed with this situation in mind. And there are electrical engineering upgrades that are needed to manage bidirectional flows. And we're maybe a little behind the curve on that. Many of our power plants are older technology and inflexible in their operation. They're wasting expensive fuel, unable to ramp up and down quickly as the sun and the wind come and go. But we live in an exciting era. This is an age of invention, where nearly all of us carry more computing power in our pocket. In our pocket than NASA had when Neil Armstrong walked on the moon. When the Gossamer Penguin took flight 35 years ago, solar panels cost about $100 a watt. Solar PV costs have declined dramatically, with wholesale panels now costing less than 1% of that, under $1 a watt. Installed solar systems today cost about 1/3 of the cost of a decade ago. And we'll see further decreases if we can get the soft costs better under control. Easier permitting, more uniform installations, and additional economies of scale. Solar installations have soared. Half of the solar systems in the United States have been installed in the last 2 years. In the last 2 years alone. Wind generation is also growing in the United States, growing in India, China, and Europe. And this has become a big business. The solar industry now employs more workers than the nuclear industry. The solar and wind industries together employ more people than the coal industry does nationally. Voters of all stripes support solar. Extreme right-wing voters support solar for energy independence. Extreme left-wing voters support solar for environmental reasons and for energy independence. And guess what? Independents are somehow attracted to independence as well. Now I'm going to tell you a little story about my friend Edie. Edie lives near Waimea on the Big Island. Her mother was coming to visit, and her mom had some health issues. And she lives on a rural circuit where they have outages sometimes, so Edie decided to buy a generator. So if there was a power outage, it wouldn't create a risk for her mom. Well, the power didn't go out while her mom was visiting, and she had a wonderful time visiting the Big Island. But soon enough, there was a storm, and the power did go out. And so Edie went and fired up her generator. And her fridge and her freezer and her computer and her lights were back at work, and life was good. And her neighbor heard the generator, and her neighbor came over and said, "Gee, can I plug my fridge into your generator?" And Edie said, "Well, sure." And so now there were two houses hooked up to one generator, and the microgrid of the outskirts of Waimea was born. So then, about a year ago, Edie decided to put in a solar system. And Big Island electric rates and state and federal tax credit. The economics were kind of a no-brainer. But the power company said her circuit was already saturated with solar, and she had to do an expensive interconnection study to go solar. And her solar installer said, "Well, heck, for the cost of that interconnection study, I can put in a battery bank, and you can just unplug from power company." And so she did. Well, another storm came along and caused another grid outage, and her neighbor asked if he could plug into her generator again. And Edie said, "The power's out? I didn't notice. But you can plug into my battery bank, and, if power outage goes on a long time, then we can fire up the generator." So now the microgrid's got another dimension to it. Then it got dark and cloudy and rainy for a week, as it sometimes can do. And Edie's battery bank was running down and down and down, and she was kind of worried about things going cold on her. So she started up the generator. Her neighbor came over and said, "Why are you running the generator? The power's on." Edie said, "Well, my batteries were just about down to nothing." Her neighbor said, "Well, I'm still on the grid. You can plug into my house." So now the microgrid is beginning to develop some real sophistication. 2 houses, 1 solar system, 1 battery bank, 1 grid connection, 1 backup generator, and 2 happy neighbors. Yet the utility has lost half of its sales, half of its customers, half of its revenue, and there's a brand new battery bank adjacent to its lines that it has no access to use. But the power in Edie's neighborhood is cleaner, more reliable, and more economical. This is not bad. We reached a point in the road, on our route to a clean energy future, where we're beginning to encounter significant roadblocks to progress. Utilities raise issues about financial stability, grid stability, and adequacy of power resources. Part of their concern is very real. Here we have the hourly output of a wind farm across a month. It is indeed a little unpredictable. Solar works great in the middle of the day, but is predictably not available in the late afternoon when utilities experience some of their highest loads. We can address this. We can install controls on our water heaters so they heat water when the wind is blowing and the sun is shining. We can add storage to our air conditioners so they can keep us cool when we need to be cool, but make that cold when the power is cheap. We'll need to install voltage regulators on our distribution grids to allow higher levels of distributed solar to work. We can synchronize our water system pumps to our electricity supply better so that we use mostly wind and solar power to pump our water. And we can curtail pumps for a few minutes here and there to balance short-term variations on the grid. We can develop markets that facilitate hundreds of small transactions to help balance loads and resources, make the grid reliable, minimize costs for everyone. And we can set prices to reward sensible behavior. We'll talk in detail about how we'll adapt to a wind and solar future in a later session later this morning. Our grids were designed for a simpler world where electricity came from a few big power plants and our job was to consume it and pay the power bill. Things are a little more complicated today, but fortunately we have tools available to us to shape our usage to the capabilities of a renewable fueled grid. The smarter grid will integrate solar and wind and geothermal and conventional generation. It will control water pumping, vehicle charging, air conditioning, and water heating. It will use some of the same technology that we carry in our pockets. HECO is living in a changing world. We know what happens to companies that do not adapt to changing circumstances. We've seen it before in major household names. And if it does not adapt, HECO is no different from the others. Frankly, I think their future may be a little bit shaky. The wind is not the problem. The sun is not the problem. In fact, they're an important part of the solution. Together, we can build a better world. If we all paddle in the same direction, I think we can get where we need to go. Let's not screw it up. The eyes of the entire world are upon us. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. You've left us with a framework of what to consider in hearing and engaging with the speakers to follow. By the way, on that slide of the Italian small car, the A by, it means let's go there. So it's a symbolic thing. Anyway, thanks very much. As in previous years, we here at Energy Day have lots to cover, so we'll be as efficient as we can. Take a look at the bios of our speakers. It's going to be your fast riders. The speakers each have 5 minutes to tell us what they've achieved in the past year and what's on their agenda for the coming year and our move to clean energy. Our timekeeper is going to let them know what time, when the time is up. Stand up, Josh. That's Josh. He's an important person from this point forward. With this kind of pace, we won't have time for questions from the floor for this round of speakers, but they'll be around during the day, so you can catch up with them later at the break or at lunch. And Jim will be on one of our panels in a little while. Okay, Carl Friedman is the forum's Regulatory Reform Working Group Chair and also the facilitator of our Clean Energy Performance Report project, something which is and has been very important to the forum. You can't get where you want to go unless you can find out where you are. We have the data, so Carl, can you give us a brief report on Hawaii's Energy Performance Report? A warm welcome for Carl Friedman.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to start things off with a very quick review of some charts that are up on the Hawaii Energy Policy Forum's Clean Energy Metrics website. And I think I gave a presentation very similar to this with some of the similar charts back during our legislative briefing at the beginning of the year. Since that time, we've updated the website with some more recent data. But the basic message for the status of where we are today is pretty much the same. The message on the website and the message I'm going to give you very briefly today comes in three basic themes. The first is that in the electrical sector, Hawaii is making measurable progress. And as you can see here is a picture over the past dozen years or so, our fossil fuel use in the electrical sector is going down. And on top of that, you can see some wedges, which are calculations of what our fossil fuel use would have been without renewable energy or without energy efficiency. During that same period of time, the implementation of renewables and the implementation of energy efficiency has decreased our costs. The decrease of the cost of our energy bill is going down as a result of this. You can see here without the energy efficiency programs implemented through ratepayer-funded initiatives, we would be paying $270 million more annually than we are today on fuel for electrical generation. The second general message is, although we're making some progress overall, we have a long way to go. So on this chart, the gray areas below represent the amount of fuel that we're using in Hawaii over about another dozen years. And just to show for some perspective, you can see there's a big drop there around 2008, 2009. I put in there the wedge again for the renewables and energy efficiency to show in proportion. Some people have credited the drop in overall fossil fuels to our progress with clean energy. But most of this actually is a result of energy prices and a slowdown in our economy. But you can get a proportion there of how far we do have to go in the future. And along with that, of course, is the energy bill associated with that. Although the amount of energy was kind of flat, you can see with the black line of energy prices what's happening with our fuel bill. The shaded area is the amount of money we're spending exporting on fuels. The black line is the price of oil. You can see that we are still subject to the volatility and the general increase in oil prices. The last message, of course, is that transportation is kind of the waiting, the waiting challenge. On the left side, you can see that transportation accounts for more than 50% of our energy use. And the progress we've been making has been primarily in the electrical power sector, which is about a third. But the ground and water transport sector is still growing in fossil fuels, whereas the electrical sector is lowering. We're lowering the amount of fossil fuel we're using. And I think we're going to hopefully hear some more from panels today about our challenges with the electrical sector. I invite you to visit the forum's metrics website. You can get a link to it from the forum's homepage. And you can provide any comments regarding any aspects there to the email. It's up there, and it's on the website. The website has all the underlying data sets, the live spreadsheets that go along with all of that, and we invite comments. That's it.
Thank you, Carl. You can see more at the forum exhibit table at the breezeway, the one that has the think tank sign, or will soon have it. Okay, we'll start today from the state agencies on our updates with Representative Chris Lee about the past session, what should be on the table in the coming session. Then we'll have Mark Blick of the State Energy Office, responsible for coordinating energy for the state, including the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative. The consumer advocate, Jeff Ono, who represents consumer interests before the Public Utilities Commission, and Michael Chang, Deputy Director of Hawaii Energy, the state's Public Benefits Fund Administrator, responsible for meeting energy efficiency and conservation targets. We didn't miss the Public Utilities Commission. We'll hear from Chair Mina Morita later this afternoon in a panel devoted to the utilities. And Senator Mike Gabbard is flying back right now, so we can hear from him at the end of the day. Anyway, so first, let's hear from Representative Chris Lee, Chair of the House Committee on Energy and Environmental Protection, a great advocate for clean energy. Welcome, a warm welcome for Chris Lee.
Thank you, Jay. I don't think I've ever seen my name so big before. It's a little intimidating. Thank you, first of all, everybody for putting this on, and most of all for giving me an excuse not to sign wave this morning in the middle of campaign season. My arms just, anyway. I do want to cover just a couple things that the legislature accomplished this year and a couple things that didn't pass, and kind of get into a little bit about where that direction is coming from and where we're going. The first was taking care of an issue that's been on the table for a couple of years running now, and that's extending the barrel tax from 2015, which was scheduled to sunset this next year, to 2030 to continue funding for the energy programs that the state uses, a number of other things, and as well reestablish the HNEI special fund, which a lot of folks are counting on to get a lot of the project work done that's been ongoing. On top of that, there's been a long-standing friendly dispute between solar installers and roofers doing the work actually installing roofs, and a debate over who has liability when solar is installed. And we tried to work that out, came to a good compromise. I think that clears that up for the time being. On top of that, pushed forward to allow expanded use of solar photovoltaic, larger scale projects on appropriate types of agricultural land where there's concurrent agricultural uses to take advantage more of the ability we have to expand that, and at the same time produce a lot of the, or to give a little bit more help, I guess, to the landowners and farmers in the area. Grid modernization was a big bill this year. That was centered around the idea that we need to not only, of course, modernize our grid and all the different definitions of that, pick and choose what you will from it, but also to create a simple process and help the PUC sort out kind of a set of ground rules for how we're going to proceed with things like interconnection and other issues that come up that are really kind of up in the air right now. And speaking of the PUC, the legislature was kind of a formal move, transferred the PUC from Department of Budget and Finance to the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, and that's, I think, the beginning of a little bit of a reorganization at the state level to try and make sure that we are efficient and moving things forward so that you don't have a lot of conflicting direction between departments and agencies and everything else. And I'm sure we're going to hear from Mina about an update on that soon. But there's a couple things that didn't make it this year that I think were top priority for a lot of folks, and we heard a lot about. First being community solar. What happens when you have an association of homes or condo units, or et cetera, who want to buy into a larger renewable project off-site? That's something that's been a new frequent tool for use in other jurisdictions around the country. The bill almost made it. We expect it to come back again next year. In the meantime, the utility and the PUC and others are continuing to work on this, and there is no technical statutory block on this from happening. So regardless, we think something along those lines is going to move forward. Updating our RPS standards has been on the agenda for a couple of years now as well. There's been talk about where do we go after 2030, and I think there's a lot of due diligence that's been done over the last year or two. We're kind of waiting to see where that's going to take us and how we set up those longer-term targets, in particular where we're now reevaluating our baseload energy sources, potential for bringing in LNG and everything else that could play into that future direction. And then finally, there's another bill that took a look at the business model for utilities and trying to compel answers and kind of a long-term plan, especially in light of some of the PUC decisions that have come down, and make sure that there's a viable path forward, not only for meeting our renewable energy goals, but also to maintain our utilities as publicly regulated energy producers, keeping them in a commercially viable place in the short term, especially in light of some of the things we've been hearing lately. So those are debates that certainly going to be continuing. I don't think there's any way around that. And I think it's a healthy thing right now for everybody to get together, and we look forward to the legislature next year reconvening and diving in, hopefully with a lot of help from a lot of folks here. So with that, I wanted to wrap. I just wanted to ask for one more thing, since I have 30 seconds left, I'm told. The biggest challenge I have in talking with the average person is that folks know we have these great energy goals, but don't know where they're going, don't know who's working on them, and have a lot of, I think, lack of trust that there's the relevant focus from the right places. And so what I wanted to do right now is just show everybody, this is the group. I mean, these are the folks who are going to be working on this and solving a lot of these problems in the years to come. And there's my beep. So what I'm going to do is just take a quick picture of you guys, because you guys are going to be the solution. So what we're going to do, everybody, here you go. Ready? 1, 2, 3. All right. Thank you very much, everyone.
It's always appropriate to take a selfie, a group selfie. Thank you, Representative Lee. That's great. Great to have you here. We look forward to a great session next year. No pressure. Okay. Mark Glick, our State Energy Office Administrator. A warm welcome for Mark Glick.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Jay. It's really good to be here this morning. I echo our gratitude for the session. And consistent with Jim Lazar's wise counsel about paddling in the same direction, I'd like to briefly outline Hawaii's energy vision and our quest for high-impact solutions to make that vision reality. Now, the vision addresses the two parts of our energy sector, power generation and transportation. which we agree have been late in focus. And certainly those two elements are going to be likely to be more, in fact, they're certain to be more integrated in the future. On top of that, we add energy conservation and the efficiency efforts. Now, we measure progress on the power sector through the RPS, and our progress to date, we're now approaching 20%. We're almost 1/5 renewable, and our progress in the power sector has led Governor Abercrombie to fully commit the state to go beyond 40%. Now, on efficiency, the PUC issued a report in January that clearly stated that Hawaii can go well beyond its statutory commitment to reduce 4,300 gigawatt hours of power sector demand by 2030, possibly as much as 6,200 gigawatt hours. On that front, we're teaming with the National Governors Association to explore best practices in the next several months for using public benefit funds to achieve higher rates of efficiency. And we're certainly focused on Hawaii's unique combination of rate reduction bonds and on-bill financing, but we'll also look to other states as well. Now, we're all increasingly focused on the interconnection problems from the rapid increases in intermittent solar and wind, especially solar DG. And we're particularly interested in how the new proposed calculations and screens, we've heard about 150% minimum daytime load, will be made more transparent to the public. What are the relative costs of mitigation efforts, and how far will that take us beyond what's in the queue today, including all the more aggressive strategies that incorporate demand response and greater consumer choice. Now, we know that's going to ultimately involve changes in rate structures and putting our state incentives to better use. But that shouldn't deter us to other mitigation strategies that must take place now. So we'll be working towards those. Now, we'll also be continue to be working behind the scenes with the Public Utilities Commission and our utilities on the roadmap that helps us integrate many of those strategies and plans. And we'll also be convening workshops this fall with the NGA and other national players like Ernst Young and Clinton Global Initiative. Our aim is to create consensus, this kind of common vision on the sticking points among the key players. And this approach will likely be the model we use for our future meetings and symposia of the Asia Pacific Clean Energy Symposium and the next phase of the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative. Now, we also remain committed to the longer steps, energy transmission, Oahu Maui grid tie, and we call upon the Public Utilities Commission to act promptly and decisively there. And I'll talk this afternoon about our comprehensive transportation planning agenda. Very excited about it, and our contract with the International Council on Clean Transportation to coordinate the analysis and dialogue. It's a renewed effort, and I'm very excited, as I said, to take that on with the great leadership of former CARB chairman and California Secretary of EPA, Ellen Lloyd, at the helm. Now, the bottom line is that there's much unfinished business. And though we're currently beyond 18% renewable, approaching 20% in the power sector statewide, we've only begun to scratch the surface on transportation, and we need to keep the pressure on for greater productivity in renewable, efficiency, and transportation. With that said, we at the State Energy Office look forward to working with everyone in Chris's picture to accelerate our state's leading efforts in energy transformation, and I defer my last minute to the consumer advocate.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, our consumer advocate, Jeff Ono. Is that a new title bestowed on you in the past legislative session? He advocates for us, the public. A warm welcome for Jeff Ono.
Yeah, that was a reference to the change in the PUC being brought from Budget and Finance over to DCCA. And now the position of Executive Director of the Division of Consumer Advocacy is officially called the Consumer Advocate, even though I've been calling myself the Consumer Advocate for the last 3.5 years. Earlier Jim Lazar started off by talking to us about how Hawaii has terrific solar and wind resources. So I want to focus on those two projects in particular, and bring everyone here up to speed on what's happened. The first is the Kahe Solar Project. That's a 15 megawatt solar PV project that HECO is planning for the Kahe Power Station. What HECO sought late last year is an application from the PUC for a waiver from the competitive bidding process. And there are exemptions to the competitive bidding process under certain circumstances. And HECO was arguing that it met those conditions of a more cost-effective means to obtain a renewable energy project. So HECO put out they did a private bid, and they got Solar City was the low bidder on the EPC contract, the engineering, procurement, and construction contract. So HECO's application showed that the price per kilowatt hour for this project would have been about 16 cents per kilowatt hour. But that's amortized over a 30-year period compared to 20-year PPAs. So HECO came up with a calculation to try to do an apples-to-apples comparison so that you could look at a 20-year PPA. And through its calculations, which we disputed the accuracy of those calculations, they said it was actually 14 cents a kilowatt hour when you compare it to a 20-year PPA. So the position of the consumer advocate was, well, this is a good price, 16 cents a kilowatt hour, whether you use 16 or 14 cents a kilowatt hour. It's significantly less than what we've been seeing in other PPAs for solar projects, or wind for that matter. But we had concerns about the pricing. Number one, HECO owned the land, so there's no land costs involved. Secondly, the transmission, the interconnection cost should be minimal because it's at the Kahe power station. And third, they're amortizing over a 30-year period. So why aren't we seeing lower pricing? And that was our message to HECO. Nice low price, but we think you can get it lower. Go back and sharpen your pencil. So we're anxious to see how the PUC is going to rule on that particular project. The second project I want to talk about is the Napua Makani wind farm. And this is a 24-megawatt wind farm that's being proposed by Champlain, Hawaii. It's going to be a PPA through HECO. 8 new turbines would be added to the Kahuku area. Again, pricing looked great. This project starts off at a PPA pricing of about 14 cents a kilowatt hour, and through the 20-year period, it escalated up to a little over 16.5 cents a kilowatt hour. Again, significantly lower than any other project we've seen. When you compare it to the Kahuku Wind, the first wind project, that one is at about 21.5 cents a kilowatt hour. Same with Kawailoa Wind, the 69-megawatt project out in the Haleiwa area. That one's priced at 21 cents a kilowatt hour. So again, the pricing looked great on the Napua Makani project, but there was a problem. The Kahuku community rose up and voiced their opposition to this particular project. The Consumer Advocate's Office attended 3 different public meetings, heard the community association, the neighborhood board, all come to a consensus that they were against the project. So we took somewhat of what was viewed by some as a controversial position that communities matter, and we need to look at what the communities have to say about these projects. So our recommendation to the PUC was there's going to be an environmental impact statement done, wait out the EIS, because the EIS is the one that looks at cultural and community values as well as environmental concerns. To those who would argue that regulators have no business dwelling in environmental and community values, I'll say this. Last year, the HECO Integrated Resource Planning docket included 68 advisory group members. If communities didn't matter, we wouldn't see 68 members. We'd be down to maybe 15 or 20. Part of that IRP process included quantitative or qualitative analysis of community values. So I think it's something that needs to be considered in the future, and we're looking forward to seeing how the Commission rules on that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Deputy Program Director for Hawaii Energy, Michael Chang. It's a challenge for him to tell us all that Hawaii Energy has done in 5 minutes. They've been reporting about that for 10 minutes every week on the Forum's Energy Wednesday talk show and Think Tech. So let's see what he can do in 5 minutes. A warm welcome for Michael Chang.
Thank you. All right, HawaiiEnergy.com. Thank you very much. No. So last year was a good year. We had several challenges. And anybody know what the number that we made last year? We have a prize for you. Anybody know how much kWh was saved last year by energy efficiency? I know Carl does. Don't say anything, Carl. No? All right, so we had 126 million kWh. Does that mean anything to you guys? That's a lot. It is a lot. It really was just a little bit less than all the PV that's been installed, the last year up to the current thing. So it's really on par. If you saw those two bars before, that was shown by earlier slides, they're about equal, and they'll probably be that way for a little bit. So the challenge is to continue that year over year, because once you take the big chunk out of it, you got to go find new ones. And I think as Chris talked about, it's a one-on-one thing. Everything we do is a personal buying decision. It's a business buying decision. So it is a one-on-one relationship. It's a talking to. So a lot of policy, great. That really sets direction, but then that has to be executed by individuals. And I think we talked about 5,000 people on the commercial side and about 45,000 people a year on the business on the residential side. And every single one of those talks has to be meaningful. When they make a buying decision, we start thinking about buying something, we need to take that from, I'm just thinking about buying a, electric vehicle. Hey, but have you considered your lights? Have you considered something? We have to make those transactions as meaningful as possible because they don't happen very often. When businesses make buying decisions, it's a 20-year buying decision. When I decide to buy a chiller plant, I'm going to do that once, and for the next 20 years, if you want to come in and control my thing with a new box, well, man, if you told me that 2 years ago, that would have been a lot easier because I didn't poke a hole where I needed to poke a hole. So that's kind of the challenges that we realize that we need to face. So again, last year in HawaiiEnergy.com, we've got a 120-something page report. You can take a look at all the numbers. But I'll talk about the stuff we're doing this year, because we're going to need everyone's help. So the new stuff for this year, one is going to be benchmarking. We've done benchmarking on a small basis a lot. So like if you go on our website, there's all 71 office buildings in downtown Honolulu. We compare them to themselves. And when you compare people with real other buildings, okay, we don't show who they are, but these are real other buildings that they're in there. It's meaningful to them. When you say you're compared to the national average, they go, well, we're different. We hear that a lot, right? Hawaii's different. And so one of the efforts that we have this year is benchmarking for local industries with local data. And we did purchase TNK data this year. We just got it. And so we're going to be melding that data together. So we'll have a lot of information. We'll be sharing with Carl, and he can get it to his team. Another one we have here is auction. We talk about creativity. So the creativity comes in is everyone is in here to accomplish something. Everyone knows something. There's affinity groups. There's people that you know, people that trust you. We talked about trust. I think Chris mentioned that. Another part is people don't trust the messages. Well, that's true. Most people buy things because, oh, my neighbor did it. My uncle said this guy was good. And so this year we're going to have an auction. The auction really is to allow, we have $2 million on $1 million on the residential, $1 million on the commercial, to allow people to bid in, to say, hey, look, I could do this. If you give me $1,000, I can go ahead, well, maybe not 1,000, a little more, transactional costs of kind of thing. But I can go this in this community and do this. I can go in and accomplish 55 refrigerator replacements. And they just really wanted someone to help them. They needed a little guidance. So we're going to have that this year. We've got an increased trade ally. Everything we talk about is a buying decision. I think one thing that we've missed a little bit is kind of taking a more proactive approach of telling how to buy, who to buy from, where to buy from. Because that is often when you get asked a question. And we need to get that message out to everyone. Everyone that gets a phone call from somebody should have that same feedback, right? It's the same thing of, hey, I'm calling. I really would like to buy a solar. Well, no, you can't have solar because your circuit's full. However, if you want to look at your efficiency compared to others, you're about 80%. Looks like you could save maybe 50 kWh by doing X. That's a meaningful relationship. That's a meaningful interaction. Then the last one here, and again, this we talk about, I think he mentioned that the PUC is not represented. They are, because this is their program. We work for them. One of the directions that we were given this year, earlier this year, was to do things for integration of energy efficiency with demand response, EV, codes and standards, and smart grid. And this is really what Mark was talking about, the IRP type discussion, or Jeff was talking about in the IRP discussion, is that the integration of everything we do, it's needing to happen now. I think everyone's pretty mature in what they're doing. On the DR side, it's really integrating the devices. What kind of device do we need? How do I need to talk about it? How does it need to speak to HECO? We're going to work on that this year. EVs, again, transactional. If you're interested in buying an EV, right now you're most likely interested in saving money. If you're interested in saving money, energy efficiency can rank right up there as far as things to do. 30 seconds. And then the codes and standards. Codes and standards are important. the codes and standards need to be local. Howard Wigg at DBED, has been doing a great job in many years saying, hey, those codes don't necessarily meet what we need to do in the tropics. However, he didn't have data of the actual homes. We do. And so we've been doing to help them basically look at the codes and standards, do a review this year to see how are the builders building. Because a lot of you builders here are building better than code already because your customers are asking you to do so. So those are the new things we're going to be doing, and I'll move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. We'll see you on Wednesday. Okay. We're delighted to have reports from the counties. They're the leaders on the front line. And I can't wait to hear what they've been doing and what they're planning. First, Ben Sullivan. He and I have a lot in common. Yeah.
Indeed.
Kauai's Energy Coordinator, followed by Will Ralston, Big Island Energy Coordinator, then Mayor Alan Arakaki from Maui, last but not least, Justin Grunstein from the City and County of Honolulu. So first, let's hear what's happening in Kauai. A warm welcome for Ben Sullivan.
Aloha. Thanks for inviting me up here today. It's really wonderful to be in front of this group, as it always is. There is some really tremendously exciting things happening on Kauai. I think a lot of you are aware of them. I'm fortunate in that people more informed than myself in a couple of different areas are going to be reporting in more detail on some of those. That's KIUC, as well as Councilwoman Joanne Yukimura, who's going to give some information on transportation. I'm going to go through some of the things we're doing that fall outside of those areas and then touch on some of the related projects. Again, just outstanding conversations up to now. Can everyone hear me all right? Okay. So we've got some aggressive goals over on Kauai. Mayor Carvalho has stood up and said, hey, we're gonna reduce our energy by 30%, not by 2030 for the county operations, but by 2023. And the reason being is because he feels like we need to lead by example. If we're going to get behind the HCEI goal as a statewide goal, we've got to get there as the county before the rest of the community does, and then be able to say, hey, let's all do this together. How are we going to do that? We're going to look real hard at our buildings, and we're already getting some help from Hawaii Natural Energy Institute, and one of our largest meters. We're going to also look really hard at our wastewater facilities. These things are already going on, and then our water department is another big user that we're making some progress on. Key to this, and Michael mentioned it, is really about people. So what we've done is we've started developing what we call a departmental energy planning program, and what that is that's really just imbuing the ethic and the thinking of energy efficiency into all the departments. It's a challenge, it really is, because most of these county people, contrary to popular belief, are incredibly busy on a daily basis, putting out fires, dealing with procurements, all kinds of different things, staff issues, this, that, the other thing. So how do you make it front and center for them? Well, the answer is you make it easy. You put it in front of them as best you can with good information. One of the things I spend a lot of time on is building energy information systems to be able to deliver those efficiencies, and we're seeing some successes there. Now I think I'm going to dive into the other part of that. So 30% energy efficiency by 2023. Another goal we have is 50% reduction in fossil fuel use from our fleet by 2023. That is a very ambitious goal, and certainly one that people have spoken about today. We're putting a lot of our eggs in one basket on this, in that we're hoping to use the methane from our landfill out in Keikaha to fuel our bus fleet, as well as some of our solid waste vehicles. So this, again, I'm referring to goals that are oriented towards county operations, not county-wide. But we believe that we can do this. We have a feasibility study underway now, and what they're going to be looking at is capturing that methane, cleaning it up, looking at the conversions to vehicles, and whether or not we can make this all happen in a timely fashion and make it economically feasible. We're very excited about it. The technology has evolved rapidly in the last few years in order to be able to do this on a smaller scale and with modular outputs. As you well know, with natural gas coming into the vehicle markets on the mainland, it's becoming a lot more achievable in terms of vehicle technology as well. So we're pushing real hard on that. And I think it's actually really exciting because on a related note, one of the things, and I suspect Councilwoman Yukimura will speak to this. Joanne, are you here? I didn't even... Oh, okay, she's coming later. So we have what we call a multimodal land transportation plan on Kauai. First one done in the state, I believe. And it has a very aggressive goal of basically levelizing our vehicle miles traveled between now and or for the foreseeable future. So the way we're going to do that is mode shift. one of the things that has to happen is a tenfold increase in our bus service in terms of number of rides until between now and 2035. And so we're going to need a lot of fuel for those buses, and we're going to need to be able to have a reliable source of fuel that does not spike like you saw presented earlier, so that, because the tragedy of not having affordable and reliable, stable bus fuel is that right at the moment you have more bus service because you're now into $100, $200 a barrel oil, you have to cut it because operationally you don't have the money, and that is not that's not an outcome that we find acceptable. So we're going to work really hard to achieve that. In my last minute, I want to really thank KAUC for a tremendous partnership. One of the great projects that's going to deliver some of our 30% efficiency goal is LED streetlights, and they've really taken the lead and worked with us incredibly collaboratively to figure out how to make that project happen. We're thrilled about it. It's still going to be a tricky project, but we're working very hard. They're working very hard with us. There's a lot of really, tremendous opportunities beyond that. We're looking at a shared motor pool for the county. Our EVs are starting to bump up in numbers and use. And then some other real exciting collaborative opportunities with KUC that are actually on the horizon as well. So with that, big aloha from Kauai. Thank you all, and mahalo.
Thank you, Ben. It's always good to hear from Kauai. Okay, we're pleased that energy is so important to Maui also, and that the Energy Coordinator Commissioner and forum member Doug McLeod was unable to attend the program, so Maui Mayor Alan Arakawa changed his schedule to be here to tell you himself about what's been happening in Maui County. They've been aggressively expanding PV and other renewables, so let's hear from Mayor Arakawa about their achievements over the past year and what's on their agenda. Oh, sorry, missed one. Yeah, let's do Mayor Arakawa, go back. And what's on their agenda for the coming year. He has 5 minutes. He'll tell you more at lunch. A warm welcome for Mayor Alan Arakawa.
Hello and greetings from Maui County. We just have 5 minutes to get through a lot that I would like to spend about 2 hours talking about. So I'm just going to get right to it. Maui, we've really gotten into a solar rooftop project, which now includes about 18 public facilities, such as our fire departments, our community centers. The energy production of these facilities last year was around 3.2 million kilowatt hours, and we have the capacity for about 2.2 megawatts. We're also putting up a lot of PV for our wastewater treatment plant, our water treatment plants, and we're slowly but surely going to convert almost all of our major power users to PV. We're looking into creating a microgrid for our facilities. This would tie in with our PV and with batteries of some kind, energy storage hooked up to our generators. Almost all of our wastewater, water have generators at the plant site, so we're looking at trying to integrate those. So if the power ever goes down, we have a mini grid system that'll keep operating, and we won't ever be out of power. We continue to work with Japan's New Energy Industrial Technology Development Organization, NIDO. We've been operating with them for the last few years in creating a smart grid project, and that's currently undergoing, and its demonstration project will wrap up toward the end of this year. We're looking forward to the data that will provide. The smart grid project is something that we'll be able to integrate in 2 phases, all the different types of energy as well as how to use energy within the home. So it's 2 different operations. We're also looking at trying to be able to collaborate with them in putting in a lot of electric vehicles. So we've been putting up EV stations throughout our county, and we're continuing that project. Just last month, I had my managing director and some of my staff go to Japan. We're looking at different types of electrical vehicles, and we'll probably start our electrical vehicle fleet conversion within a year. So we'll start purchasing slowly but surely, replacing some of our vehicles with electric vehicles. One of the things that we also did was we started putting in GPS within all of our vehicles so that we could note what the traveling capacity of our vehicles were and what are the capabilities and how we're using our vehicles. So we actually have a much better study and an idea of what's going on. So when we try to convert to electric, we'll be able to have much better data. We're looking at using medium-sized wind turbines at some of our water treatment plants, and such as the Kamoli Water Treatment Facility and at our Maui landfill. We also know that both of these projects have some challenge to making use of the natural wind resources, but this will cut our energy costs in those particular areas. We're also looking at PV-powered LED streetlights, and we have a little bit of a challenge in that the electric company actually owns all of our streetlights. So we're going to have to negotiate with them to be able to do the conversion. We pay the bill, but they own the facilities. Overall, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get to 100%. And our goal is 100%. I actually believe that looking at the 2030 goal of 70% is much too little and taking much longer than it should be. But I'll be able to expand a little bit more in the 15 minutes I have at lunchtime. So that's a little bit of a brief recapping of what we're doing right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Arcano. Okay, I'm going to go back to Will Ralston. From the Big Island, Will Ralston, Hawaii County's Energy Coordinator. Sorry, Will. No. A warm welcome for Will Ralston.
Thank you. Okay, great. Well, I really want to appreciate, where is it? Oh, right here. Okay, great. Let's see if it works. Good. Okay, I really appreciate Jeff Ono. That was great. Vetting projects like that, like you said, is incredible for a persisting project of 20 to 30 years. Again, I have to thank the consumer advocate and the PUC, the hardest working people, I think, in government. County of Hawaii's energy program, basically, let me get back to this. We're at about 50%. I guess Jay will speak later and he'll tell you how that happened. And we got to thank Hawaii Electric Light for doing that. They've integrated geothermal, 2 wind farms. They're going to integrate a 3rd wind farm, 3 hydro plants, and lots of photovoltaic energy. So this is an incredible feat. Oh, sorry. This is an incredible feat to integrate 50% renewable energy. So I want to thank Hawaii Electric Light. So the photovoltaics are now at 50 plus megawatts. So soon they'll be higher than our largest generator on the system, which is the Keoholi plant at 60 megawatts. So this is a concern. I could see why it's a concern. We also have a biodiesel plant that does 5 million gallons a year. So we're already in the transportation renewable energies, and that's where a lot of our focus is going to be in the future. So our basic goals are to do energy efficiency first, like Michael Chang said. Doesn't make sense to put renewable energy up until you get your buildings efficient and your facilities efficient. Then we move into on-site renewable energies. Now we're moving into storage and transportation projects. We have a battery storage system at the West Hawaii Civic Center, one at the Koyo water plant, and we have one at the Hawi wind farm. So we're well into storage at this point. We just struck an MOU with Nelha, Helco, and County to do more storage R&D. From there, we'll go into more utility partnerships and collaborations like we are at the Lalamila Wind Farm. And hopefully we'll have great demonstration projects where we have 100% renewable energy like the West Hawaii Civic Center. And then our overall goal is economics. It doesn't make sense to us to do more renewable energy without doing cost-effective renewable energy. So we put another dimension on it. We're not going to pursue renewable energies unless they're actually cost-effective, and we believe they are at this point. This is kind of our energy portfolio, what we did in the first fiscal under Mayor Kanoi's direction. He couldn't be here today, but you would enjoy working with him. He's a great manager and leader. So we did our Green Government Action Plan. We put in 1,000 LED lamps, and we started in the PUC dockets. Now we've moved into biodiesel, trying to combine PV, battery, and electric vehicles. And we're going to do all of our street lamps. So we'll have LED street lamps across the island of Hawaii, which is kind of the first in the world. And in the future, we're going to start doing these far-out projects like wastewater treatment and waste-to-energy hydrogen buses, geothermal and wind to transportation fuels. Okay. we've done a lot. You can't read it. I kind of said it already. I don't know what the time clock says, but I always tell people this. 50% of my time is spent in the PUC docket, so thank you, Chair. And the other 50% is doing projects. I hope in the future it's more like 70% projects and collaborations with HELCO. I always put this one up because Tesla and Westinghouse said centralized gen, and they were right. But now it's kind of changed to Edison and distributed gen. So once our computer technologies came up, we've actually shifted from the 1900s where centralized gen made the most sense, and it still does in lots of cases. Like, you know, Jay's looking for more geothermal. That makes a lot of sense. At 8 cents a kilowatt hour, that makes a hell of a lot of sense. So, but we're in the era where, like, Edison was right. Distributed gen makes sense in a lot of locations, especially if you can get down to 10 cents per kilowatt hour in energy. This is kind of how we measure ourselves, kilowatts per BTUs, so we look for efficiency that way, not just reducing energy, but getting more out of each kilowatt hour. This is our West Hawaii Civic Center, 250 kilowatt array. We store it in the lithium ion battery, another partnership with HELCO in storage. And we have 6 electric vehicle chargers, 5 electric vehicles. It works out to $2 equivalent gallon gas. We're putting up a wind farm at Lalamila to power our water wells right on site. And that'll be a perfect use of distributed generation. And Nelha will be our future research, development, and deployment site. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Will. It's not about energy, it's about relationships, you know. All these partnerships really go places. Lots of stuff happening on the neighbor islands. And now from the City and County of Honolulu, Justin Gruenstein, who is the city's energy coordinator and also responsible for sustainability and environmental projects in the mayor's office. A warm welcome for Justin Gruenstein.
Thank you. I'm actually, my title is not energy coordinator, just executive assistant to the mayor, which means I get to do whatever he says. That ends up dealing with energy projects as well, so it does fall under me. And it's a great field to be working in. A lot of the projects that the city and county are pursuing right now are dealing on the transportation side, and specifically in reducing the use of cars and improving bus, and of course the rail project is a very significant component to it. So I'll just dive right into some of the projects that we're working on right now. First is LED streetlights. As you may have heard, the mayor is aggressively pursuing, and we're in the process of drafting an RFP right now to convert all 51,700 of the city-owned streetlights to LED. It's a significant project. Based on the 3 small pilots that we've done, the projected 40% more efficient lights will equate to a 60% savings for the city. Again, that's pretty significant when you're talking about 51,000 plus streetlights. Bike Share Hawaii. This again was a very aggressive plan that was put forth by both the city and county of Honolulu and the state. And it's hoped that it will be expanded statewide eventually. But we just received the organizational study from the consultant. We were very happy to see that. Gave very positive outlook on initiating bike share in mainly the urban core of Honolulu. They're currently interviewing for an executive director, and we should see a full implementation by the end of 2015. In government terms, that's light speed to implement something of that magnitude. So we're pushing very aggressively to make sure that happens. But we should see at least the beginning of the implementation by the end of next year. Bike lanes, again, this is a priority of the mayor. To expand bike lanes so that when we have bike share and so more people want to commute using bicycles, they can do so feeling safe and have a means to do it without having to fight the traffic that's already on the streets. That's usually the number one prohibition of folks when they are asked, why don't you bike more? or use alternative means of transportation. It's feeling safe on the road. So that's a real key component to it. Right now there is King Street and Waialae Avenue are being targeted for bike lanes. Waialae, of course, was just recently repaved. That was another project that I was responsible for overseeing. And I'm very happy that that's finally done. And then King Street will begin probably in about September. And once that project is redone, the lanes will come in at the time that it's repaved and restriped. In addition to that, we're adding conflict zone paint to areas where we don't quite have lanes, but to increase visibility and notice for drivers that there are bikes, to be sure they share the road, and to be on the lookout for bikes that are using those same lanes. Transit-oriented development is another key component to all of this coming together. There are obviously zones around the rail project. Right now, progress on the plans and zoning is taking place rapidly. Plans are starting to get adopted in the first 10 miles, which is the first phase of the rail project. Island-wide housing strategy is coming out next month, and walking audits of all 21 station areas to improve access have been completed. And again, the tie to energy here is that the whole premise of these TOD zones is work, play, and live, nearby. So you get the cars off the road, and it reduces the emissions and the need for the fuel. We're also very pleased that we've been working closely with the Hawaii Natural Energy Institute to receive an SBIR grant to convert an out-of-service garbage truck to hydrogen. And it may be one small project and that it's only one garbage truck, but we're hoping that it'll lead to bigger things. And of course, just the opportunity to collect the data lets us know how we can proceed on that. In that same vein, we're pursuing a grant to acquire 3 hydrogen city buses. Again, same purpose. We'll see how that will play out and how effective it can be, and that may lead us to pursuing that on a bigger scale going forward. Of course, the city's H-Power, with the 3rd boiler up and running, by the end of this year, we'll be burning sludge from the wastewater treatment plants. That's also significant in that, A, it produces energy, which means we're not burning fossil fuels to produce that energy, but it also means that sludge is not being taken to the landfill, so it's very much better for the environment. And then one of the things that I'm most excited about, and this is on the horizon here, is an RFP to utilize city properties for renewable energy projects. And that's just a very broad help us partnering with the private sector and other nonprofits to say, look, the city has these assets, and you're the experts in this, or you have the creative ideas. What can you propose that we can do at the city with our properties, or how we can partner into utilizing them for renewable energy projects? So I'm looking forward to that coming down the pike real soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Looks like plenty is happening in Honolulu. On the utility side of things, we're pleased to hear again from Kauai Island Utility Cooperative, KIUC, the state's only member-owned power cooperative. Tell us what's happening there. And what will happen going forward is Jim Kelly, KIUC Communications Manager. A warm welcome for Jim Kelly.
Good morning. Thanks very much, Jay. It's great to be here. Speaking of our members, we just had our annual membership meeting last Thursday and had over 300 of our members come and hear about what we're doing. And it's exciting because we are doing a lot. We had a terrific year last year, and we've got some really great things going on this year. Just finished our annual report, which should be on our website pretty shortly, and it's got details on everything we're working on. I'll just touch on a couple of things real quick here. Speaking of LEDs, which everybody's very excited about, we gave away 3 LEDs to everyone who came to the meeting. Now, we got 300 people that came this year, and only 150 came last year. So I don't know. I think it's because they were excited to hear about what we're working on, but could be the light bulbs, too. And we had a giveaway. We're going to do 3 at Kukui Grove about 3 Fridays ago. We were giving away 3 light bulbs to anybody that showed up. We had 1,000 people standing in the heat to get their 3 free LED bulbs. So, and at lunch, I can tell you about the lady who tried to smuggle some extra LED bulbs in her pants at our annual meeting, and then broke them as she was trying to get some more. But that's a little Kauai anecdote there. Right now we're testing our new Koloa solar array, which is right now the largest solar array in the state of Hawaii. It's 12 megawatts. We're doing testing on it right now. It should be fully online probably sometime this week. We're really excited about that. It's going to displace 1.7 million gallons of oil a year, and that is very significant, as everyone in this room knows. We just a couple of weeks ago had a groundbreaking for a second 12 megawatt solar array at Anahola. Again, that'll displace about 1.7 million gallons of oil a year. That should put us very close by the end of next year, along with the finished green energy biomass project, which is a project we're not doing. We'll be buying the energy. That's going to provide about 12% of our electricity. By the end of next year, we figure we're going to be very close to, we'll be over 40% renewable and very close to achieving our goal that our board set to be 50% renewable by 2023. We're going to beat that deadline, and we're very excited now. We're working on figuring out the next 50%. Among the things we're looking at, we had a meeting in Waimea a couple of weeks ago. We're looking at a possible pump storage project because we are going to have a lot of solar that's going to come on the grid starting next year. We're going to need to find a place to put it because we don't have enough demand during the day. We certainly don't want to curtail it, so we're looking at doing a 25 megawatt pump storage project someplace on the west side probably of Kauai. People are very excited about it. People understand the issues with curtailment and having too much solar and not enough demand during the day, and we got a lot of really positive responses to our discussion of that project, so I'm sure you'll be hearing more about that. We also recently, our board approved a PPA with Gay and Robinson for a new hydroelectric power plant. It'll be the first new hydro plant on Kauai in over 90 years. It'll provide about 6 megawatts of power, which on Kauai is quite a bit, and is really going to help us achieve the 50% goal that we've set and exceed that well ahead of schedule. That's probably the best I can report on our ongoing projects. I'd also just want to mention my personal favorite project was the Smart Grid. We've completed our installation of smart meters on Kauai last year, and we have a lot of people that are actually starting to use them the way that we want them to. We unveiled a new web program that people can log into. They can check their own energy use. It's called My Meter. We just did a soft rollout probably about 6 weeks ago. We've already had over 1,000 people that are signed up for that, and they're really getting a lot of use out of it. So that was nice to have that project finished, and it's also really helping us manage our load, and when you have a lot of renewables on, as we do, that kind of information that you're getting in real time is just really valuable. So thanks very much. Appreciate your interest.
I'm really impressed. Pump storage. That'll be fabulous. We got to do more of that. Okay, you might be asking where Hawaiian Electric Company is on these updates and issues. Not to worry. You'll hear from them in the panel this afternoon. Stick around. For the first time, we're going to hear from the refineries. Lance Tanaka, Director of Government and Public Affairs for Hawaii Independent Energy, the successor to Tesoro. He's a lot to share about what's been a very active year, you will have noticed, and what's coming up for refineries, like it or not, that still affect all of us. A warm welcome for Lance Tanaka.
Thank you, Jay.
We still love you, Lance.
Nice to hear that, too. Been a great group of speakers so far, and then you've heard a lot of data from them, so I won't really dwell on numbers here, but rather share some insights. Now, Hawaii's petroleum industry truly believes that when it comes to available energy, we need all forms of energy as Hawaii makes this transition to a clean energy economy. So with that in mind, let me start with a 10,000-pound gorilla in this room. And that would be that according to the governor's Hawaii Refinery Task Force report, either one or both of Hawaii's refineries are likely to close by the end of this decade. Now, I should tell you that Chevron and Hawaii Independent Energy do not intend to close their refineries. However, there are some daunting challenges in front of us. And I should state right up front that energy policies are having an impact on fuel use. These include the Federal Renewable Fuel Standards, the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative, and that includes the renewable portfolio standards that our utilities must comply with. And of course, people's energy usage and fuel usage are evolving. Now, renewables and alternatives, they are penetrating the marketplace, and this is very evident in the electrical generation arena. Now, worldwide, and especially in Hawaii, utility fuels are coming under a lot of pressure to burn cleaner. In addition, refiners have to comply with myriad regulations, including the federal mercury and air toxic standards, Tier 3 gasoline specifications, and let's not forget, Hawaii has a greenhouse gas emissions reduction law for us to comply with. Now, with all of this, if you were a refiner, how would you view having to comply with all of this? Well, I wanted to touch upon three implications here, and especially with regard to closures. Refiners now have to look at how the people who are most reliant on this important energy source will be impacted in the future. And so one of the things that we always have to understand is those in greatest need of this energy, which would be, for example, during disaster recovery, how would they manage during disasters? Now, through our collaboration with the Hawaii Civil Defense and FEMA, we already know that access to fuel is a very critical component of disaster recovery efforts. And of course, the obvious thing is without on-island refining, we will be, of course, dependent on imported fuel. Now, operating a terminal is one thing to bring in finished fuel, but you have to consider that in the future there could be multiple independent parties that will be, I guess, tasked to meet Hawaii's demand. And doing that in short notice could be very challenging, especially when they don't really understand or are not certain of the economics of doing so. And finally, product flexibility. Everyone should bear in mind that when your supply model is to bring in finished fuel from the outside, there really is very little flexibility. And in particular, off-specification material is going to be very problematic. So what is the industry doing about all of these things? Well, currently, energy assurance planning is really the rage right now. And the industry is collaborating with state and federal disaster recovery experts to further define our pivotal role in disaster recovery. Everyone knows that diesel fuel is needed to power hospital generators. They power the bulldozers that must clear the way for emergency vehicles. Airlift operations are reliant on jet fuel. And of course, the vessels that bring in needed supplies all are powered by marine fuels. What this means is currently alternative forms of energy are not quite ready to displace this important energy source. And I guess knowing where your energy will come from during an emergency is going to be very key. However, with the lack of on-island refining, we think that there's an added complexity now that will be added to disaster recovery efforts. Now, in the area of policymaking, the industry is engaged in working with decision makers and stakeholders to make people further understand how local, state, and federal policies will impact the fuel infrastructure. So finally, Hawaii's refining industry is pledging to continue running safely, reliably, and responsibly so that we can continue being a vital part of Hawaii's energy mix, because we feel that Hawaii's population demands no less. Thank you.
Thank you, Lance. Good news. We have Rick Rocheleau, director of the Hawaii Natural Energy Institute, HNEI, tell us what's going on in energy research. We all ought to know about this, developing new technologies that are so important to our future. He's principal investigator on a number of projects to evaluate and develop these technologies. with great benefit for Hawaii. He can tell us what scientific delights we can look forward to in the coming year. A warm welcome for Rick Rocheleau.
I don't think I can keep up with that introduction, so I think I'm going to sit back down. Okay, I have a couple of new pictures on my introductory slides. I got rid of the solar and the wind for a day, but they'll come back at some point. So I'm going to just kind of cut through a few things. Just wanted to highlight a few projects that are going on, a couple of them that are pretty timely. Some of you might have seen the news last night, but yesterday, actually I think it probably happened over the weekend, but we got announced a new $9 million award from Navy for wave energy testing off the Marine Corps Base Hawaii. So that's kind of an interesting project. Navy's investing $10 or $12 million in infrastructure. DOE is investing really a similar amount to support the developers that come to test, and then we got a separate award to conduct a number of what I'll call assistance efforts, including marine support and environmental studies. So that, people are familiar with the old OPT process there. This is going to grow it substantially. It has bursts at 60 and 80 meters and capable of holding systems that are over 500 kilowatts. So it should be a big increase, and there are developers ready to come and do their testing at that site. Programmatic EIS, a lot of people are familiar. That was going on. The closing period for comments ended last week. The final document is being drafted. That's providing general environmental guidance for undersea cable and also the land-based activities that might be around that. It's not an EIS per se, it's a programmatic EIS. We're making some progress. Hydrogen kind of keeps percolating along. We have a fast fill fueling station open up the Marine Corps base next month. Might even still be next week, but it's next month for sure. And we have a project on the Big Island, including some hydrogen infrastructure to produce fuel and 3 buses, 2 at Volcano National Park and 1 for community service that will start up later this year. On the energy efficiency side, we have a new program started. We've been doing some work with advanced buildings with O&R funding for a while, some buildings they were interested in for deployment out in the Pacific. We developed a number of tools around that. We're now working with the Department of Education to do analysis of a number of the classrooms and buildings starting down at Campbell, making some measurements, looking basically at how do you increase comfort without necessarily having to make a huge investment in infrastructure and energy, meaning might be solutions other than air conditioning to improve comfort. So that's a project that just started up. We've had some demonstration programs going on for a while, a couple of battery projects. Was mentioned earlier, we have a 1 megawatt battery over in the Big Island, frequency regulation and wind smoothing. We have a 1 megawatt battery for some work here on this island on a circuit that's got a high penetration of PV. That will be shipped next week, it looks like now. And we have a 2 megawatt battery that's slated to go on Molokai maybe later this year, early next year. We have our smart grid demonstration programs continuing, and we're doing work with advanced inverters. Basically, inverters that can communicate with the meter so you can start to do better management down at the distribution level. And kind of the piece that fits into, I think, a lot of what's going on here is we continue to do the energy assessments and modeling work. A lot of that in support of the PUC activities funded partly by barrel tax, partly by Department of Energy. Not going to dwell on this slide. I kind of got one point here. There's been a lot of the studies have been at the system level. How do we keep the match between generation and load going so we don't have frequency variability, make sure we have reliability of the system? Separately, there's been the issues at the circuit level, the utility putting constraints on distributed PV. I think the point now is, these are starting to get loaded up enough that 2 are really talking to each other a lot more. So issues at the circuit level really need to be identified and solved at the circuit level to make sure there aren't problems, but the circuits are really starting to impact what's going on at the system level. So Mina always says we need an integrated systems approach. It's more important than ever that we do that because these impacts are starting to show up. So a couple of real high-level conclusions from some of the preliminary work around that modeling. We've looked at kind of what might happen as utility goes forward a little bit. And if you retire some of the old, slower thermal units, you can actually get substantially more wind and solar, and that's with or without cable. There's lots of different ways of doing it. You can even start get up into the 50% total electricity range without a lot of curtailment. But the more recent studies have shown that without adding other things into the system, including fast response systems, you probably decrease reliability rather substantially. So it's how do you then balance between reliability? Adding renewables to it does help reduce that risk. It's additional capacity on the system. And so then you might start to introduce curtailment again. So zero curtailment may not be the goal. There might be some balance between that to really make the system better. Kind of mentioned the distribution systems affecting it. Lot of mitigation strategies. We're going to hear about some more of them this afternoon. The details are really important. What's in the system, what the hardware is really important. And I see that I'm done. That was a fast 30 seconds at the end. But I wanted to show one slide at the bottom that really impacts things. People talk about doing control of load day to day, hour to hour, but that slide at the back kind of shows the variability of the renewable wind and solar day to day over the entire year. So there's big variabilities from day to day that we really need to be able to account for. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. I want to change my introduction. Rick is in the middle of everything. I want to change my introduction. Rick is in the middle of everything. Things are this is great, Sharon. Sharon, this is great. This was great. This update, learning so much, getting a kind of a baseline on everything. Okay, Warren Bollmeyer. He's challenged. He's chair of our own Renewable Energy Working Group and president of the Hawaii Renewable Energy Alliance. Just back from the mainland and may still be jet lagged, is that true? And is nevertheless also limited to 5 minutes to tell us what's going on with all the renewables he follows, wind, hydro, geothermal, and more, and what's on the horizon for the coming year. Okay, Warren, talk fast. A warm welcome for Warren Bollmeyer.
Thank you. Wind, solar, biomass, geothermal, hydro, ocean, and wave. That's 7. Turns out that's the approximate number of grandkids that I have. We're at 7 3/4, so next year if I do this, I'll have to change and go to 8. So what's been happening in the last year or so? Let's get on with it. First off, my fancy charts. We have wind, approximately 200, I want to call them now legacy wind farms because that's how I'm starting to see them. But are we on a plateau? We heard some encouraging words earlier about maybe more small-scale stuff coming, and then under evaluation still is the offshore. So that's wind. What about solar? What happened in the last year? Lots. That's a new metric for you, Carl, okay? What's happening so far in 2014? Not so much. So what's really happening? On the DG side, I guess the best way to say it is things are under evaluation, particularly the interconnection standards, and there's some issues with respect to queues. So basically this is slowing things down. I'm hopeful that we're going to get through this evaluation. HECO's working hard. By the way, this is primarily about HECO working hard on some circuit analysis, and the results will probably help us move forward. So what about utility scale? Okay, I say queue crunch. There's maybe 150 megawatts in the queues. That includes utility scale, and I should also say some net metered systems on the larger size and what we call standard interconnects. So it's starting to loosen up. One of the real hazards of this, by the way, who knows what NRI and IRS, not the IRS. So NIRS, Interconnection Requirement Study. Nobody knew that, or they're just shy. Well, it turns out for most developers, this is the critical path. You can't finish your negotiations until you know exactly what you have to do in order to interconnect with the grid. A lot of these studies are coming to fruition, so I'm looking forward to later this year, more projects are going to finally get to the power purchase agreement negotiation phase. Moving on to biomass. We got some legacy projects. Everybody knows about the HCNS sugar mill, cogen. I treat H-Power also in the same category. I think my colleague Bob Schleusser, I don't see him here, calculated maybe about 50% of what they burn there is, in fact, renewable. And also Pacific Biodiesel for their early work on Maui and Oahu. The next wave we got is more biodiesel. It's in place now. Big Island Biodiesel, Pacific. Hawaii Gas is working on their renewable gas facility. I believe it's operating. and also Huhonua, which is under construction, 21.5 megawatts on Big Island. And in the future, I see maybe advanced waste to energy and more renewable fuels with local crops. Geothermal. Will didn't talk about that, so I'm obligated. We got PGV, 38 megawatts, 8 megawatts, which is flexible, meaning that they can vary output, and that shows promise. Key thing here, Andrew Gill helped me with this, DBED. It saved $6.8 million in fuel costs last year for the Big Island. We need to maybe think about how to make that a metric. So there's a 50 megawatt RFP on. I'll just say briefly, the projects are under evaluation, the proposals. Primarily, they were looking for a plant on the Kona side, low cost and with flexible generation. For hydro, we got some utility legacy projects. We got Wailuka River Hydro. The next wave is going to include pump storage. I understand Kauai is moving forward with plans on a 25 megawatt. And what are we going to do on the other island? And maybe there's still some potential for run of the stream. 30 seconds to say not much about ocean and wave, because unfortunately most of this is in the planning stage with one exception, seawater air conditioning coming soon. Thank you for this opportunity to give our presentation. 4 minutes and 59 seconds.
Thank you, Warren. Okay, Dawn Lippert. The commercial end of things. We have Dawn Lippert from the Energy Accelerator. It's spelled EXCEL, important. Part of the energy program at Pacific International Center for High Technology Research, PICTR. She can tell us what her entrepreneurs are up to last year and what they'll be doing in the coming year. A warm welcome for Dawn Lippert.
Thanks, Jay. All right. Thanks, Jay. We almost made it, guys. I'm batting cleanup, so we're almost there. It's been a great lineup. Thank you all for the updates. I think we all learned a lot. So I'm going to talk about something a little bit different on the innovation side here, and specifically about clean tech investing and where that is right now. And you're probably wondering, okay, well, you guys are part of a nonprofit. What does this have to do with clean tech investing? There are massive amounts of capital right now flowing to clean tech investing, just as much as last year. We saw about $350 million in the first quarter of this year, and we're on track to increase that. So I'm going to talk about sort of 3 trends quickly in clean tech innovation entrepreneurship, and then 3 highlights for us of this year, and then lastly an ask for you guys of how you can help us. So like I mentioned, the first trend is in significant amount of investing. I just got back yesterday from Silicon Valley. Our team's been spending lots of time in Silicon Valley where the capital is really flowing, and we see a lot of this innovation coming from. And for us, it's important because we're not interested in innovation for innovation's sake, but to solve all the problems that Rick and Michael and everyone's describing here at the system level. So we're looking for innovation that can make our system more efficient, more capital efficient, and more cost effective. So the major trends that we're seeing right now in clean tech investing across the world are in agriculture, transportation, and smart grid and energy storage. Those are the 3 areas that are seeing by far the most capital flows. And actually aligns really well with what we're doing at the Energy Accelerator, trying to help companies and startups commercialize their technology. So this is what we saw. We got about 250 companies interested in applying to the Energy Accelerator this year. We do a yearly call for applications from startups. And we saw, as you can see, a lot of action in agriculture and transportation, but by far the most in the grid space. And we see a lot of space for innovation here in analytics, in smart grid, and making our grid more efficient, and in bringing in the latest innovation to help us solve our challenges. The second major trend is around increasing corporate investment in this space. So we've been working really closely with Siemens, Johnson Controls, ABB, Chevron, Hitachi, the list goes on, to try and help bring some of those corporate dollars back here home to Hawaii and help make some investments in the solutions that we need here. And then the third trend is that we're seeing also increasing global interest in Hawaii as a test bed, with huge kudos to, I'd say, Mark and Richard Lim and their team in really marketing this idea of Hawaii as a test bed. We've seen applications from over a dozen countries this year. 3 quick highlights for us have been one with one of our companies. Here's all of our companies. It's really about people. One of our companies, IBIS, as of this morning, has closed $805,000 in investment for their company, mostly in venture investment, both locally and from the mainland. So this is really about creating jobs and creating startups and momentum out of our companies. We're seeing really very strong momentum out of our companies here. The second highlight for us was taking all of these companies to pitch at Google. We had about 40 or 50 investors specifically in this space, and our companies came and pitched to them, and they threw us a big party with ahi poke and Kahlua pork sliders and all the rest. So it was really awesome to have Hawaii represented in that way in Silicon Valley in the conversations that matter around bringing capital to bear on these problems for startups. And then the third highlight for us has been community support. So really seeing these folks come together in a number of different ways, supporting our companies. I'm actually curious, how many of you here have either talked to a member of my team, which many of us are here, or have talked to one of our startups about implementing a project? Is that it? I got you, Michael. I know Mina has too. So, I mean, this is really about our community coming together to support startups. It's not easy being a startup, especially here in this business environment in Hawaii, but we think it's one of the most critical paths to getting to the energy future that we want, is incorporating innovation where it makes sense and where people have really good ideas. So our final highlight to share is that this morning, actually, we just moved into our new space right across on Bishop Street. It doesn't look like this anymore, so we'll keep you guys in suspense. You're going to have to come visit us to see what it looks like now in the Cade Study Building. And it's an energy innovation space for our entrepreneurs where they can collaborate and demonstrate their energy technologies and all work together. And we have had amazing support from the Department of Defense, the Office of Naval Research, the Department of Energy, the state of Hawaii, and Hawaiian Electric Industries to make this happen. And we're bringing in, as I mentioned, capital from other sources as well to collaborate. So that's what's next on the horizon. And our ask for you folks is to, I'll go back, continue meeting with our companies, continue helping them with the commercialization of their projects. This takes individuals helping companies bring innovation and integrate it into our infrastructure and into our structures here. And also help us align our policy environment, our human resources, and our technology path in a way that's flexible enough to incorporate new innovation and new ideas so that we get the best of what's out there, and we can't do it without you. So thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. What you do is kind of a metric for the future of energy technology. Okay, given our time limitations, we'll move right into our next panel. We have a panel now called A High Renewables Future. This is going to be led by Jim Lazar, who spoke earlier as our keynote. We have two other discussants who will engage with him, Rick Rocheleau, who spoke earlier, on whether we can do what Jim says from a technological perspective, and Mark Duda from Revolusun from the commercial perspective, that is on whether and how we can sustain a long-term industry here. Take it away, Jim Lazar.
Hawaii's got an abundance of renewable energy resources: sun, wind, geothermal, ocean resources, and the others that Warren talked about. But getting those resources to power our homes, light our stores, cool our offices, and run our computers in a reliable fashion is pretty challenging. Now, many of you are familiar with the so-called duck curve produced by the California Independent System Operator, showing how growing solar energy supply during the day is creating this very steep ramp rate in the afternoons for utilities to meet early evening peaks. And in Hawaii, it's becoming very, very challenging indeed. This is really a pretty simple situation. We've had loads that have always gone up and down as people wake up, go to work, and eventually go home and go back to bed. What's changed is the addition of wind that comes and goes, and solar that's predictably not available to meet demand late in the day. Earlier this year, I wrote a short paper entitled Teaching the Duck to Fly. I recommend it to you. I've got a few copies with me, but it's available on the RAP website at raponline.org. The paper addresses 10 strategies to match loads to resources and resources to loads. And I'm going to talk about 5 of those strategies today. First, targeting energy efficiency into key loads that are concentrated in the late afternoon. Managing electric water heaters. Thermal storage on air conditioners. Changing pricing to concentrate rates on the most expensive hours, and limited deployment of battery storage. Not every strategy in the paper is applicable in Hawaii, and there are some solutions in Hawaii that may not work on the mainland. The paper shows how we can flatten out the duck curve. Here on the top, a sample duck curve from one particular utility, and at the bottom, what it looks like after the application of the 10 strategies. Now here in Hawaii, the neck of the duck is even steeper than California. Maybe it's not a duck, maybe it's a nene. The point is, we can sleek this bird down, and this bird can fly. Now, I'm going to start with some things that are not part of the answer. Everybody makes their own electricity, and the grid becomes obsolete. Lots of expensive off-grid batteries. Using diesel fuel to grow biofuel crops. Barriers and barricades to solutions that come from utilities, from government, or from the financial community. And perpetual subsidies of mature technologies. Those are not part of the answer. I like to think of the solution as a three-legged stool consisting of policies, programs, and pricing. I'm an economist, so maybe I look at things a little differently than an engineer would. Policies like the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative. Policies like the future adoption of a visionary energy code for new construction. Programs like the Hawaii Energy Efficiency Incentives or the solar tax credit. And pricing changes like time of use rates and critical peak pricing. So here's some bits and pieces of the solution that I'll touch on that I think are applicable here in Hawaii. First, concentrate conservation efforts on key hours. Make loads more flexible. Use pricing designed to shape loads. Install storage in key locations. Keep a shared grid viable. And resolve the big wind versus distributed energy policy debate. I'm going to get into some technical details now. We can target our energy efficiency and load management programs to key loads and key hours. When I looked at a recent HECO IRP, for example, I saw that lighting is about 13% of residential peak demand. KIUC has made some effort, both at their annual meeting at cutting that in half. We can cut that residential light. We cut that lighting load approximately in half with CFL deployment to date. We can cut it in half again. Cooling and water heating make up almost half of residential peak demand. We can schedule that load. And with thermal storage of hot water, storage of chilled water or ice. Taken together, we could probably cut the residential peak demand by a third without affecting anybody's quality of life. Same story on commercial. Lighting is, what I saw in the IRP, about 45% of the commercial classes peak demand. We can cut that in half with modern lighting technology. Cooling is another 17%. We can reschedule the chiller load, about 90% of that air conditioning load was storage air conditioning. Taken together, we can cut the commercial peak demand by a third without hurting anybody's business operations. So I'm going to talk about some of these technologies. First is grid integrated water heating. The lowly residential water heater happens to be a great storage battery. It holds a day's supply of hot water for a typical apartment or condo. And you know, in the apartment and condo area, solar water heat isn't really an option. There's just not enough roof. And but the electric water heaters that I use in the tourist condos I stay in are probably going to be there for a while. We can heat that water whenever power is plentiful, when the sun is shining or the wind is blowing, and we can use it whenever we need hot water. It can also provide ancillary services to the grid. Those water heaters can be turned on and off very quickly to provide balancing services. Now, these are sophisticated systems. They're not preset timers. They're not just simple on-off systems. Here's the dashboard of the fuel gauge, if you will, of a grid-integrated water heater. It shows that this particular water heater is currently at 146 degrees and has a tops out at 170. It shows that this particular water heater can hold a total of 25 kilowatt hours worth of storage energy in the form of hot water. And this particular one has about 9 kilowatt hours of available storage remaining. I did some rough guess of what the technical potential is here in Hawaii. There's something like 150,000 electric water heaters in the multifamily sector here. Think of that as a 600 megawatt battery that you already own and is waiting for you to install the controls to use it. They could probably provide all of the balancing needed for about 300 megawatts of variable renewables here in Hawaii. I believe if they were fully deployed on Maui, in the multifamily sector in Maui, they could completely eliminate the wind curtailment. And it ought to be possible to get that done in months, not years, because this is pretty simple stuff. The next strategy is storage air conditioning. And I'm saying require storage on new air conditioning. This is a picture of the Ice Bear unit, a unit built for strip malls and other commercial buildings. It's a rooftop air conditioner that makes ice when the power is cheap and runs only the fans to blow that ice, blow air past that ice during the hot hours of the afternoon and early evening. It eliminates 90% of the peak demand of the air conditioning. Folks, this is not rocket science. Nearly every one of us has an ice storage system in our home. My ice maker produces 12 ice cubes an hour, but I can use up to 288 ice cubes every day when I need to use them. And guess what? I use most of them between about 4 and 7 in the afternoon, at the same time we need air conditioning. If you're having a big party, would you wait until the first guest arrives to start making ice? Or would you make it over time so you are ready for that peak demand? Storage air conditioning is the same concept. Storage air conditioning means you can make the cold, which is the blue part of this graph, which normally occurs in the in the afternoon hours, and move it. Well, only the fans have to run during the peak hours. You can move that into off-peak hours. Now, in the past, that's meant making ice at night to level out the load. And with our current rate designs, the incentive is to make it whenever the rest of the building systems are not working. But in the future, in a high wind and solar world, it might be partly in the middle of the day that we want to make that ice, but maybe at 11 in the morning before the air conditioning peak for using it at 4 or 5 in the afternoon. This is the Kohl's store in Redding, California. The whole roof is covered with solar, except for the Ice Bear units. The PV panels shade the roof, which reduces the air conditioning load, saving about 20% of the air conditioning requirements. The grid operator can control when the Ice Bears are making ice and when they're using ice, based upon grid economics and grid operation requirements. There are already quite a few thermal energy storage systems for air conditioning in Hawaii. The Kapi'olani Medical Center has shifted cooling load to off-peak hours. In a hospital, this is can also mean a smaller backup generator, and that can pay the whole capital cost for anybody that needs to have an on-site generator. The Iolani School has an ice storage system. The Harley-Davidson dealer in Kahului has an ice storage system. Storing energy in ice tanks is really pretty basic technology for moving electricity needs around in time. But this needs to be a building code requirement for new buildings and for replacement air conditioners. Now here I've got a graphic that shows some cost data. Thermal storage is cheaper than electricity storage. This graphic compares batteries, which are the kind of orange boxes here, pump storage, hydro, compressed air storage, flywheels, and a few other technologies. The vertical axis is the capital cost per kilowatt hour stored. The horizontal axis is the capital cost per kilowatt of instantaneous peaking capacity. When I superimpose water heating storage and air conditioning storage onto this graphic, it comes in at the cheap end of both. Cheapest if you do it at the time of new construction or replacement of equipment, more expensive if you do it on a retrofit basis. Now, thermal storage is also more efficient than electricity storage. A battery loses 20 to 30% of the power that you put into it in the charging and discharging process. You only get back 75% of what you put in. A water heater only loses about 5% in standby losses. But it can make that back if it's making the hot water off-peak when the grid line losses are low and avoids making that hot water on-peak when the line losses are high. It can get that 5% back in lower line losses. An air conditioner can actually be even more efficient than storage. Air conditioning can be more efficient. If the cooling is done at night when the air is cooler and the heat rejection is better, you actually get more BTUs of cold for every kilowatt hour you put in. I understand that the Kapiolani Medical Center has achieved about a 15% reduction in their total electricity used for air conditioning with their ice storage system. So this can be both an energy storage system and an energy conservation system. Next, I'll turn to water pumping, which uses water and wastewater treatment pumps use about 5% of our electricity. We can do a better job to synchronize our water pumps to our electricity supply so that we use excess wind and solar power when it's available to pump our water. The idea is you give the water and wastewater utility a low price when power is cheap, and that encourages them to run their pumps and store water when they can, and perhaps add some storage, and a much, much higher price when they need to run at hours that require using fossil fuels to augment the power system. That gives the water utility a lot of financial incentive to manage its use better. So that's a transition into pricing. Current HECO rates are not time differentiated for the overwhelming majority of customers. There are some who choose the optional time of use rates. Here's the current HECO residential rate. As we have more and more variable resources, we're going to need to make these rates, these time of use rates, the default rate. Here I've shown an example of a residential rate that has a separate distribution rate of 10 cents a kilowatt hour, and then an off-peak, on-peak, and critical hour price. The critical hour price might only kick in for a few hours a day, maybe 10 or 15 days a year when the system is really stressed. Experiments all over the world have shown that this kind of pricing can reduce peak loads by as much as 35%. Power fed back to the grid by customers with PV systems would be net metered at the power rate. Solar customers would get full credit for the daytime value of their power, but only the power they take from the grid would be assessed the distribution rate. So in essence, they get treated like an independent power producer. Turning to the large customer end of things, the same principle can apply. The current rate provides the same incentive to save power at 3 in the morning as at 6 in the evening. A better rate design would include a demand charge only for the circuit level distribution costs and a time varying rate that concentrates the price into the peak hours to give those commercial customers an incentive to invest in storage, air conditioning, and other technologies. Batteries will have their place, but they're expensive and they really need to do double duty in order to be cost effective. If installed at weak points on the grid, they can avoid distribution cost upgrades. If we can control the timing of electric vehicle battery charging,
we can offer those electric vehicle customers an economy product that helps them and helps the grid. And my local hospital learned that they can use the UPS for their surgical suites in the afternoon for peak shaving because surgeries are pretty much all scheduled in the morning. And peak loads occur in the afternoon after the surgeons have mostly gone home. They do keep a little reserve just in case something unexpected comes up. Electric vehicle owners can and do use electricity differently. This graphic from O-Power data shows how electric vehicle users use a little bit more power in the mid part of the day. That's probably because they've got bigger homes and they're wealthier people at this point with the electric vehicle fleet. But in the middle of the night, their usage can soar, and that can make a big, big difference for the utility system, finding a place to stuff that wind power in the middle of the night. Preserving a shared electricity grid is also important. There's a benefit to that grid. It allows us to coordinate wind, solar, and conventional power plants. And it allows us to work with battery storage, thermal storage, pump controls. The shared grid needs to be accessible to all citizens. Within reach, everybody is within reach of the wires. It needs to have the capability to know where loads are going, where its resources are, where its assets are. And it needs to do all of this very smoothly so computers don't reboot. We need to resolve the big wind, big geothermal, and decentralized power issues. And when I first came here to work on energy, it was big geothermal was the big deal, and then more recently, big wind. We need to resolve this debate. Hawaii has been subject really paralysis by analysis, and that needs to end. We can't let these competing ideas tear us apart. Big wind, geothermal, biofuels, and conventional power plants are a decentralized future. We can work together and find the best path forward in the public interest. I need to finish off by talking a little bit about HECO's future. The current utility business framework may fail if it cannot adapt. Market Street Railway is one of the most important cases in regulatory history. The company was losing money as bus and automobile competition grew. They asked for a rate increase, and the PUC turned them down. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled that a public service company with a failing business model does not have a right to charge whatever it takes to keep running. Now, Market Street still has transit service, but from a different provider. The point is that if HECO does not meet today's challenges, it will fail, and the job of the state to find a framework for reliable service will emerge, and that will be messy and expensive. Thank you. Thank you, Jim. We have two other speakers in this panel, Rick Rocheleau and Mark Duda. Thank you, Jim. We have two other speakers in this panel, Rick Rocheleau and Mark Duda. But before we go there, we want to tell you about the live SIFT opportunity. Okay, you can ask questions, and Alex Burgos is going to show you how to do that. Once you're on, you've logged on, livesift.com, and you have logged in with the energy keyword, you'll be able to ask as many questions as you want. And this machine will count the questions, so you will see in the corner how many questions have been posed. And when the program is all over, you can ask questions relating to any or all of the speakers in the panel. When the panel is over, we will have our question vetters, Carl Friedman and Mike Hamnett, look over the questions, see what the duplicates are, and pose them specifically to the panelists. Okay, so start now. Everybody on? Alex, are we on? Okay. So you will see the number of questions in the right part of the screen There we go. So go to livesift.com, enter the code ENERGY if you haven't already. Okay, and then you will have a little box by which you can pose questions. And the questions come immediately, and they are counted immediately, and you will see the number grow. We've had programs where the number of questions in a given panel was in the hundreds. So feel free to ask anything that comes to your mind, as many as you wish. And the panelists have told me they don't mind hard questions. In fact, they relish, they welcome, they enjoy, they're prepared for hard questions. There. So when you start posing questions, the number on the right-hand side will go up. Right? I just wanted to tell you that now before our next speaker goes. Who is our next speaker? Have you decided?
We have. I think we just did.
Okay.
All right. Before I started this morning, Sharon asked me to kind of stir up some controversy, and so I appreciate the effort, but you have to give me sort of more to work with. Jim actually did a great job, and so, to the extent that my job is to cause controversy by critiquing what he said and did, he just didn't give me a lot of scope. So, I got to criticize something else, which is basically going to be the rest of you, which I include me in that thing. So these are points sort of that emerge from his presentation that I think just generally go out to the kind of Hawaii policy making edifice, which again includes people from all different aspects of legislative, regulatory, market participants, that kind of advocates and everything else. So. Here's kind of where I get to thinking about this, and these aren't in any particular order. But in general, I think when we think about framing the problem and therefore also the solution, there's some sort of endogeneity problem where we think about these issues from inside a world that's roughly the electric power regulatory perspective. And I think that's limiting. It's particularly limiting when you have kind of those things embedded in broader social change, and it's particularly limiting in Hawaii where you have to factor in other stuff like the benefit of liberating yourself from dependence on anything from outside in a context where you're this isolated. And so all else equal, this is going to make you want to value reducing your reliance on things from outside, more so than a place on the mainland and this kind of thing. And it doesn't really get factored into, what's the cost of such and such resource on the grid. Also, I think we could give much more scope to the sort of embedded financial options in the different energy mixes and energy resources, and there's value that I think doesn't get factored in just reducing the exposure to the volatility in any kind of fuel price, whether it's fossil or not. So, I think we're just weak in terms of factoring that in there, and it's because it's hard, and it's because, this thing is changing. The other thing is that I think that the people that do this kind of thinking tend to be a certain kind of people. It takes a lot of experience to sort of become competent enough just to start talking about the problems that we're talking about, and in the process of getting that experience, you kind of get indoctrinated into this regulatory framework that I'm talking about, this approach. And I think for example, or for counterexample, I think if you took a bunch of software executives and you did a great job of describing the problems that we actually face in this state in energy, and you said, so what are you guys' solutions? This group of talented people would come up with a bunch of things that are not the same things that any of us would come up with, and that they don't view as particularly hard to accomplish on the software side. It's just that we don't think of those things, and we don't integrate them into the solutions to our problems. And I know this is a little more polemic than the reality. It's not that there's no software involved here and that we're not trying to do smart grid stuff, but if you just really kind of take that thought seriously, there's a bunch of ideas that are not getting brought to bear on our problems, and it's partly because of the structure that we embed ourselves in. The other thing is that I think technology and pricing are moving faster than policymakers think. The lesson of the distributed PV boom in this state is that this thing can move much faster than we can plan for. If you look at the Clean Energy Agreement, there's almost no scope in that thing for rooftop PV or distributed PV at all, and it's the thing that's happened most in the period since that thing has been in effect. And so, nobody is looking at that and saying, wow, what else aren't we thinking of? It's kind of like, okay, we see all the pieces, how can we move them around and integrate them so we don't have too much of this and not enough of that? And I think, meanwhile, there's all this stuff going on in parallel that's to some extent racing past what we're actually considering as we consider our solutions. And we heard Dawn saying earlier that storage is one of the places where you see the most clean tech capital being invested. It's clearly the case. I mean, I can't go a week without getting a call or a meeting from a storage provider. They look at Hawaii as the place where the fundamentals are the absolute best for their product, and they're trying to find a way in. And what I tell them is that between those fundamentals, which there's no disputing, they're incredible, for their product, there's got to be a way that we can use some of this stuff. You have this mediating layer that is in between that and actual market opportunities. That literally there's no way to implement this. And not only that, but actually, like our plan, which is something that we need to do, is to rethink all of this stuff so that you don't know what the actual market opportunities are going to be for storage. A couple of years from now, once we get done reconfiguring all the things that we're going to reconfigure and that we need to reconfigure. So what I sort of think is going to happen in the meantime is some other markets will get it together, and those companies will focus elsewhere, and we'll have missed this kind of window. The next point is that there seems to be some sense that we can just choose a solution and then go ahead and make that thing happen. And I just don't think that's the reality. I think that as Jim said, it's certainly not socially optimal to have off-grid PV or any other generating technology paired with storage off-grid. But at the same time, that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. This thing needs to be viewed not as one of the possible outcomes, but as a constraint against which we optimize as we try to solve this kind of energy mix problem and overall regulatory set of issues. And I think we got to recognize that we can kind of guide some outcomes, like with Jim's water heating thing, but you can't actually choose it. And if for some reason storage gets cut by 75% tomorrow, it doesn't matter what the rest of us are talking about here. That's going to just win. It's cheaper, and we lose access to that kind of lever. So this thing is happening, and we should view ourselves as kind of racing against it as we go. Which leads to a kind of a related point. We're just taking too damn long. We haven't really done much, I'd say, in terms of really setting ourselves up for the future or even the present that we're actually living in terms of policy making. It's just, some stuff has happened and other stuff hasn't happened, and we're kind of muddling through. There's no sense of urgency associated with what we're doing that relative to the magnitude of the challenge, and we just need to be more cognizant of this and do better. The other thing is that I think we got to recognize that this is a really, I don't know what you would call it. It's a less frequent than once in a generation kind of change. What's going on when we shift from not only from fossil fuels to renewables, but from distributed to centralized. And that's changing the sort of relevance of a lot of the embedded regulatory incentives. And to think of an example, I think that the kind of regulatory compact and the practice up to date has driven a socially suboptimal level of reliability, even if intermittent renewables didn't exist. Like, there's an embedded assumption that the thing that we need to aspire to is 100% reliability. And this works great from a utilities perspective, because it means that in order to get that last, whatever it is, 5%, 3%, 2%, 1%, you have to spend increasingly more money, which is all rate baseable. And so anybody faced with those incentives would be supportive of 100% reliability. But this is totally an unexamined assumption. Like, what is the evidence that the public, particularly today, wants that level of reliability, and that we need to aspire to that going forward? You could make an utterly different assumption that the grid ought to provide some level below 100% of reliability, and then the customers are going to respond with distributed reliability beyond that. And so, you already see this actually. Like, hospitals can't say, well, if it doesn't work out, then no problem, we'll just let these people die. They've already invested in it because they have this additional incentive. But if you took, I don't know what, a small nonprofit that has, 3 people working for it who could probably work at home a couple of days, they would probably be willing to take less reliability for a lower rate. And this type of idea, like, there's tons of stuff like this out there, but we're just like stuck in this old world, and stuff is changing too fast to not consider the validity of this kind of thing. Just have 2 more points, and I think I'm on track time-wise. I think there's a lot of simple stuff that we haven't done. Like, if you think back 20 or 30 years ago, like who were the people that were conserving energy? It was like Sierra Club members. And why did they do it? It was just like, we told them to. Hey, you know, you guys should use, you know, people should use less power. And there's some people that took it upon themselves to say, that's a good idea, I should use less power. And they didn't get paid, nothing else like this. So if the cheapest power or the extra power we have now is distributed renewable power in the middle of the day, then why don't we just have a public service thing, like wash your dishes at 1 o'clock in the afternoon kind of thing? You know, like there's stuff like this that we can do and we're not doing, and you could follow behind that with Hawaii Energy working with Blue Planet to retrofit timers on dishwashers so that, you know, the utility or the customer could set it, or the utility, like this type of stuff is just super doable. And so, you know, the I guess where I get to, you know, conclusion-wise is that if you think of every possible policy-generated outcome to whatever our problems actually are, you know, I don't know what the answer is, but you put all that stuff on one side of the scale, and on the other side of the scale you put people just go off grid because we didn't get it together in time. Those things to me are exactly evenly balanced. And so I think unless we think of it roughly in that way, we're not going to have the creativity, the flexibility, and the sense of urgency to really get this type of stuff done. So none of that's a critique of Jim, but thank you.
Well, I'm going to be way shorter because after that I kind of came in, didn't know this was a time talk, but just to make a few comments on the talk. But, you know, I think when I look at where we are and what's going on, I mean, I kind of mentioned the reliability part. Jim gave a lot of interesting pieces of technology. There's a lot of stuff out there. I think one of the issues we're really facing today is we don't have a clear vision of where we're going, and Mark just mentioned that. But, you know, we went into Clean Energy Initiative. We set goals on renewable, on efficiency. We're moving down that path. The problem is technology is coming along. Things are happening kind of independent of the plan. Sometimes they go along with the plan. Sometimes they're separate. And I don't think our ability to think through where it's taking us and what the implications are keeping up with the changes. And I think that's getting to be a real issue. And people are finding solutions as we go, but I think we're getting to the point now where we're really getting to be at a really critical crossroad of that. And it comes down to understanding what the implications of future actions are going to be. And even when I looked at Jim, and I'll give a little bit of a critique of Jim, you know, we started out with the duck curve and the fact that, you know, as we put more PV on, we have to worry about the ramping going up at the end of the day. And then a few slides later, and sorry, Jim, I didn't give you any warning, we're looking at doing load shifting so that we can cut down what's going in the middle of the day. So, you know, there's a lot of ways of moving energy around. There's a lot of things that we can do to change the way energy flows, you know, whether it's conservation or it's technology or it's storage or it's integrating solar in a different way or controlling it. But I don't know we've set a clear path to which is really optimal. I mean, what do we really save with time of day rates? I mean, I don't know. It's probably out there somewhere, but I haven't seen a really good study to say what we're going to save by moving energy in a different way. One of the things that came out, you know, and you know, I'm a university guy, so I kind of dwell on analysis sometimes. But we started to look at EVs. We did a study as part of some money for DBED, looking at integrating electric vehicles into the grid. And there's a nice premise, and it was on one of Jim's slides. You know, EVs, you can charge them at night. Great way to take up the curtailed wind. You know, solar's a different issue. So there's kind of this nice assumption out here that, you know, as long as I can use my EV or other time of day usage variability, I can start to capture my curtailed energy and the whole system's going to get better. So we did this analysis with EVs. We threw the numbers into one of the studies we did and said, let's assume there's a gigawatt of renewables on this island. You know, it's a mixture of wind and solar, and we did it different ways. It didn't really matter. And then we looked at, you know, we had, you know, 700 gigawatt hours or something of curtailed energy. So, you know, just since we were doing it for EVs, but it could have been other things, we said, let's assume we got 700 gigawatt hours a year of load that we now need to manage. So it's a certain number of cars. But basically, if it's a car or a lot of other things you're doing, you need to have that amount, spread over the entire set of vehicles or usages, kind of averages out to kind of the average amount every day. And what we found was that, we went through some analysis of let's only charge, by managing, nighttime where we think there's the most curtailment. Then we said, okay, let's let there be some charging during the peak time. We went to kind of random. And what we found amazing was it didn't make very much of a difference. And we were really confused. We kind of feared our models were wrong and we were messed up. And that was where that one graph I showed came in. We finally went back and said, okay, let's look at how much curtailed energy there really is every day. And what we found was that on some days, you had 5 times as much curtailed energy as you could possibly take on the loads that you have. And for half the days of the year, you effectively don't have enough to charge your load. So it really changed our conclusions about what was going on. So, and I'm not trying to say we shouldn't be moving forward, but I think in terms of how we do this and what the benefits are, we need to get people working together more. I mean, part of this message is there's a lot more to be done, but there's a lot of stuff. The utility's doing a lot of this kind of analysis. HNEI is trying to do it. The PUC is doing their own set of studies. Somehow we need to get this information integrated and looked at in a broader perspective so we can get a better vision of where we want to go. There was some mention a little bit about, is reliability really the ultimate goal? That's kind of the final comment I want to make. I'm not sure it is. The utility right now does operate with certain reliability constraints on them. They need to be at certain levels to meet, different islands have different goals, different requirements imposed on them as well. That might be something that by relaxing it can change the way we integrate renewables, what we can do. But ultimately that calls into question who pays, who's responsible, and how do we adjust that. So along with the technical, how do we integrate this in more, I think both from the integration of PV, from reliability, we have an awful lot to do to just look at where responsibility lies and how we get things equitable. And partly that comes down to business plan. Utility needs to do certain things, but there's a lot that the community is going to need to learn to accept as well if we're going to change the way we do business and to change the way the overall system operates. And that's kind of my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Jim. So we have 49 questions. You can continue to ask questions. It's okay. If we don't, still 49. If we don't get to all the questions, that's okay, because we'll call these guys down to one of our talk shows on Wednesday, the Hawaii Energy Policy Forum, energy, Hawaii, the state of clean energy, every Wednesday, and we'll ask them the remaining questions on the show, so it's not lost. Anyway, I'm going to... Starting tomorrow, exactly. You're going to be there. That's right. Jim's going to be on our show on tomorrow, 4 to 5, so you can listen. Go to thinktechhawaii.com. It's there live. Okay, and then I'm going to turn the microphone over to our question vetters. Oh, I don't have to. Okay. So you have selected a question. The question is about off-peak pricing. HECO doesn't have the capacity to bill residents that way. What is a reasonable time frame for them to implement that? Anybody?
Well, the smart grid proposal is before the PUC. They expect them to act on it efficiently, and HECO to implement a system efficiently thereafter. It's a few years' time to get a smart meters and a meter data management system implemented at the residential scale.
Okay. Next. It's like a panel of judges looking through the 50 questions for the one that turn them on. I love this. We have to get a picture of these guys collaborate, Shoot him one. Oh, Rick, how do you measure reliability of the grid, on or off, Frequency, voltage spikes, lags, are they weighted differently? Can we commoditize them?
Okay, this is on. Is this on? Okay. Okay, I'm not a reliability expert, so I'm depending on people who are. But there are statistical, there's, from my layperson point of view, I view it as two types of problems. One is statistically units go out, there's maintenance going on, systems are intermittent, so you can run lots and lots of cases of what the grid needs and what's out there statistically to provide that power, and calculate, you know, how many times a year or how many years per event, depending on how stable your grid is, that you might not have enough capacity to provide the grid. So it's a numerical measure of loss of load or loss of service events. There are also, in a more complicated process, there are very rapid dynamic responses within the grid when there are faults or trips in the grid that seems to verge somewhere between very complicated electrical engineering and black art, from what I can tell. But there are people who can do that kind of analysis, and as we change the grid, and it depends on what the hardware is and how fast it responds, you can look at the likelihood of those kinds of events causing causing utility to do make additional changes, which usually involves load shedding. I mean, it's, you know, if they can't manage frequency, you know, up or down, they need to change generation and need to change load, and there are complicated ways of doing that kinds of analysis and looking at where you're really at risk. And then ultimately, the PUC collects data so they can look and see whether utility is doing good or bad, or whether it's getting better or worse as changes are being made in the system. And so ultimately, that's the final say is how is it really operating historically compared to the past.
It's a dynamic process, and you learn along the way.
You learn along. You can model and predict, and then you also learn along the way as you go. You just hope you don't learn by going too far over the edge.
Okay, another one. Jim, any examples of ice chillers operating to provide solar load, and doesn't that increase the needed chiller system capacity?
Well, the coal store that I showed was specifically installed as an ice storage system coupled to a solar system. It may increase, generally does not increase the chiller system load. They're installed two different ways. One is you cut the size of the chiller in half and you run the chiller sort of 24 hours a day, and during the hottest hours of the day you're running the chiller and the ice system simultaneously to cool the building, and at night you're running the chiller to make ice. The other way they're built is with a chiller system that's sized to make all of the ice that's needed at night, or on a scheduled basis or a controlled basis, whenever power is cheap. And then you meet all of the afternoon cooling load with the ice system. The first is much lower capital cost because you've got half as big an ice storage system and half as big a chiller. The second gives you the ability to schedule your ice making whenever power is cheap and meet your load whenever the demand for cool is there. And optimizing those systems is challenging. But for large buildings, for the condo that I'm staying in with a central chiller system, it's only like 2 to 4 cents a kilowatt hour to turn night into day. I mean, it just, it's a quarter or an eighth of the cost of battery storage. Getting that systems to work economically at the smaller scale is going to require somebody putting it in code, and then manufacturers start building them in factories to do that, and the cost will come down, just like almost all of us have an ice maker in our freezer, even though it's a lot more expensive than 2 ice cube trays.
Further to that, Rick? No. Okay. We go to the next one. Mark, who should pay for the storage required to accommodate additional photovoltaic on the grid? Everyone, solar owners, or other?
Yeah, I think there's you can't actually answer this question until you know how we're going to attempt to get it on there. So I mean, if we implemented time of use kind of rates along the lines of what Jim kind of coarsely outlined in his presentation, and you're getting paid 50 cents a kilowatt hour to deliver power in the evening peak, then you wouldn't necessarily have to do anything. I think there'd be a market response, and people would come up with different ways of delivering that power. It might be that they just wanted it, if they're in a windy spot where it's windy at that time, that would be the lowest cost, and if that was enough, you wouldn't see any. But alternatively, you could have people making power with PV, which is cheap and getting cheaper all the time, and delivering at that time. So I mean, that's just one example. I think the premise that we're going to buy a bunch of storage and who has to pay for it isn't actually the right answer. It's what are you going to use it for, and how is that embedded in this kind of overall set of changes?
I would just say if the solar is just someone's individual decision, they want it on there for their own independence, it's them. But if it's part of a system and an integrated plan, you're going to have to find some way that it gets distributed equitably. The market may govern what comes in, but it's going to have to get equitably distributed so that ultimately everyone's contributing.
Combination of policies, programs, and prices. The prices have to be there to provide the economic incentive for people to do it, but in order to make sure people buy economical and reliable products, there needs to be policies in place, programs to support it, so that people have access to good information in order to help them make good decisions.
Okay, I think we're running a little bit close to our deadline on this. So how about one more really good one, Carl, Mike? There it is. Okay, this is not an unfamiliar question. You must have all thought about this. Is there any limit to the amount of photovoltaic that can be integrated on Hawaii's grids? Okay, we never promised you a rose garden here today.
Well, I mean, I think the answer is no, but it would be foolish to make all of the power from PV because it would be so costly to store it all. I mean, you would need, 100, we had 49 days of rain a few years ago, so that means you need 49 days of autonomy, that kind of thing with your storage. So that clearly doesn't make any kind of sense. But if you think of where we are now, first of all, the fraction or the figure that everybody's familiar with, this, we're at 100%. Has absolutely nothing to do with the share of the power that's actually on a circuit that's actually made from PV. That just isn't what that fraction is. And so, where we seem to be tending toward as a waypoint, as a stopping point, in the kind of going forward basis is the point where no power is backfed through the substation from a feeder. So if you think about it, like the point at which that starts to happen, you've got the energy equivalent of 1 kilowatt hour, say, flowing across. So in order to stop that, you need to soak up 1 kilowatt hour somewhere. That's not particularly costly, and if that's the limiting factor, or drive load to that point during the day, exactly. So again, this question is the wrong way to think about it. We could have vastly more on now with very little change in technology and very little cost, but we'd have to decide that that's what we want. Right now, we appear to have decided that we want to stop and think about everything rather than interconnect a bunch more with these very, very minor low-cost kind of changes.
That's what we're doing here today. Rick?
Okay, I would agree that we can put substantially more on, but there are technical issues associated with it. There are reliability issues, and people need to be aware of those, and those need to be addressed. And incrementally it's been pushed forward. But ultimately, the discussion we just heard was basically on the circuits. I think that keeps being moved out a little bit. PV can go in other places as well. But ultimately, you're increasing the difficulty of operating the grid with PV for something that generates for a relatively short period during the daytime. So there are going to be additional costs associated with it as the penetration level increases. So it again comes down, same as the battery question, who's going to pay for that and what's the value relative to other solutions?
Great. Jim, you have any final comment on that? Okay, what a great panel. Thank you very much, everyone. Okay, we're going to discuss these action steps. Oh, we have action steps? We have action steps. Okay. This was now the panel conferred earlier about this. We have action steps, and maybe somebody can read the entire phrase of the action step? Because I can't see it. I don't think we can see it. Alex, why don't you read them in entirety?
Okay, so pick the top actions. Install controls on electric water heaters. Install electric water heater controls. Require new air conditioning units to have thermal storage. Implement time of use pricing for all customers. Phase down solar incentives. And ensure rate design does not push solar customer off grid. So you can pick more here in order of importance to you, and it'll rank. And then you remember to click send to get the results up.
Okay, so now if you look at your screen on livesoft.com, you've already done that. Good. We're working together here. Okay, you have a couple of seconds more, and then we'll all take a look at this. All right. So, look at it change. That's great. Okay. Comments from the panel on this? Are you surprised?
We're trying to figure out how many people voted.
Right. You just don't know that. Okay, P.S., at the end of the program, if you put your email address on the site, it will send you a full report of all the questions that were asked. I mean, all the 50-some-odd questions that were asked, and all these answers, too. Okay, we can discuss these action steps and priorities over lunch. Lunch is served in Cafe Julia. We also have luncheon speakers, so what you do now is, there's more? Get your plates quickly. Come back here by 12:30 p.m. so you can hear our luncheon speakers. Hawaii Electric Light Company President Jay Ignacio and Mayor Arakawa from Maui. We think you should try hard to get back here by 12:30 so you can hear those talks. Thank you again to a great panel. Candid, authoritative, what's that? What? There are two more questions. We have to. Where are they coming from?
I don't know. Okay. Yeah. If you want to, you can actually look at your iPad or iPhone and rate these. But go to Cafe Julia, get your lunch. You can bring it back here, eat outside or eat inside of the cafe. At 12:30 here. Thank you.
That assumes I can give you that less reliability more, but the fact is, the amount that I control is very small. I can't control Ben hitting a pole or a tree going into the line on a street. It's going to affect those people.
No, I agree with that. I think you're talking about the other kind of liability. Yeah, exactly. So, I'm just saying, just to oversimplify, right? Like, if you needed to buy a widget X in order to, in a world with more distributed PV, reduce frequency excursions that would result in kind of tripping, then let's say you had that thing. Well, no, you just say, hey, here, let's put it to a vote. Do you guys want to have a system? We're going to have to raise your rate a penny in order to buy this thing that will result in a world that has this much more PV, but your probability of having an outage as a result of these frequency excursions is going to go up this much. Or, so do you want to pay the penny, or do you want to live with it? And if the vote is, this is oversimplifying, but if the decision is to